Los Angeles. District 15 council member Janice Hahn gives dollar amounts that the city could potentially lose.
This historic agreement last night to settle the budget, but clearly it is going to impact us in a way that I don't even think we're quite sure of how. So I introduced this today. It will, to have a report back on Friday to tell us how this $166 million will impact us. That includes about $120 million in property tax, $66 million in gas tax. Not to mention, they could take $1.7 billion in CRA funds, which would have us lose an additional $70 million to develop projects in our neighborhood. So while they were all up there congratulating each other and shaking hands and saying, that this didn't raise taxes and that cut spending and prevented job losses, I was having a terrible case of indigestion watching them congratulate themselves, because what it meant was they pushed it on to us, and we may now have to go back to the table as it relates to layoffs, furloughs, everything that we negotiated so beautifully.
And stating he is unsure if the state will be able to pay back any borrowed funds, District 13 council member Eric Garcetti is against any transfer of funds being permanent.
This is pretty bad news. And I think you framed it actually correctly, Ms. Hahn. While everybody's patting themselves on the back there, we're the ones who are getting punched in the stomach. Up to $256 million will be taken away from us. We are still trying to work out the details, but $120 million borrowed, which we might be able to make whole through putting bonds against. But if they're not fulfilling their payments to other folks, why do we know for sure the state will ever pay us back? $66 million permanent take on our gas tax. Outrageous. And, our local people pay a gas tax expecting that money to come back for their streets, their roads, to make things here in Los Angeles better, not to balance the budget in Sacramento. And up to $70 million of our CRA money, which in the midst of an economic downturn when we have the highest unemployment we've seen since the Great Depression, would seem to be the absolutely worst time to take money out of redevelopment projects that have people who are in the building trades right now in doing construction. We have things like the W Hotel opening with living wage agreements and people able to, in the hospitality industry, which is now our number one industry, to be able to get jobs. This is like, colleagues, we're the house on the street, the household that has been very careful with our money. Right. We've saved some away. We've balanced our budget. Our bond rating reflects that we are a family, if you will, that has done well by its money. This is like the really rich guy down the street suddenly finding himself so much in debt that he knocks on our door and says, "Give me your money." That is not fair. That is not right. And I think the people of Los Angeles and all the local cities and counties in this state need to be heard strong. That while we will step up and do our part, we know this is tough times, we are willing to take a loan, as we said, against our property taxes with the promise under Prop 1A that will get repaid. You cannot take our gas tax permanently, and you cannot take half of all the CRA money that is out there as well.
State legislators are smiling at our expense and taking our money to balance the state budget. That's according to District 3 council member Dennis Zine, who believes the deal that was made is going to be detrimental to Los Angeles.
What I find amazing is you look at the front page of the two local papers in Los Angeles and you see the leader of the Assembly, leader of the Senate, and the governor all smiling. And the statement is, leaders strike deal on budget. Plan calls for deep cuts in services, no broad tax increases. The bottom line is they're smiling at our expense. The other paper, governor, leaders agree on fix. Well, they fixed us. They fixed us because they're going to take our money away. So while they're gloating over a budget, that budget is going to fall on the backs of Canoga Park, Reseda, San Pedro, Arleta, Van Nuys, Pacoima, everything. So the voters need to let them know that they shouldn't be smiling. It's like they've robbed us of the dollars that we need for our community, and we already had an agreement with the coalition of unions and what was going to be happening with those folks. Now I believe that's all going to have to come in to renegotiate again, where we made commitments based upon our $500,000 $130 million deficit, which now will be $800 or $900 million deficit, which obviously is not going to benefit the people of Los Angeles. So while the governor and the state leaders are gloating over the deal they struck is detrimental to the city of Los Angeles and all parts of the state of California, large and small, whether it be Burbank, Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, every municipality in the county of Los Angeles, they're all going to be suffering. So what they've done is taken our money to balance their $26 billion deficit through their mismanagement, and it's outrageous that they want to smile at the expense of the folks of the city of Los Angeles. This is frightening what our state legislators are doing.
Calling the state government dysfunctional, District 11 council member Bill Rosendahl contends they're cutting all the wrong programs, and he calls for a constitutional convention to restructure state government.
Took yesterday. I mean, not only are we as a city getting screwed in our monies that we need to do our job, but the little folks are the ones really getting nailed. $4.3 billion cuts to K through 12, $3 billion cuts to other higher education, and you know, when they talk about seniors losing their home health care and these other issues, they're cutting all the wrong programs to begin with, and then they burden us even further than we've been burdened. Look, I'm for a constitutional convention. I'm for changing the state's constitution and restructuring our state government, and I know we're going to go in that direction with this frustration we all feel about the state government.
With the state budget still being debated in Sacramento, Friday's meeting continued the concern about the state budget, with Janice Hahn characterizing it as highway robbery. She calls on staff for an explanation of what it will mean to Los Angeles and talks about a possible lawsuit.
The budget that the state is about to pass is, really is going to be very difficult for local cities all across the state. Some would even say it was irresponsible. It was very annoying to me to watch them all smiling and congratulating themselves on coming together with the deal and pretending like they were going to be saving jobs and without raising taxes. But in fact, if it's true that we may be losing close to $250 million, we're going to lose about $120 million in property taxes, $66 million in gas tax revenues, $70 million in potential community redevelopment appropriations. I just felt like we needed to have a report from our own city staff on exactly what they're hearing, what they think this could mean to us. And then I don't know if it would be appropriate for us to go into closed session at some point to talk about the idea that maybe we join with the county and with other cities in actually suing the state of California to stop them from taking this money. Again, we worked so hard to balance our budget, and we were in hours and hours and hours of very fragile negotiations with our unions. We came up with a deal that was going to avoid furloughs and layoffs. We're experiencing pain, and we've made some serious cuts. We all have. But the thought that they could balance this budget and on the backs of local government was very, very troubling to me. So I thought it would be appropriate sooner than later that we hear from our own city staff exactly what this budget is, what it means to us, and then I think we need to decide what action that we take as responsible lawmakers in our own city and protecting the public welfare in the state of Los Angeles, what we need to do maybe to stop this highway robbery that is what I'm calling it from Sacramento. Thank you. State highway robbery. That's right. Federal highway. So.
Okay. First of all, in terms of the status, the Senate did pass the budget bills. There are about 31 total bills that are currently before the Assembly. There are a number of bills that the Assembly has not acted on yet. They're still in session. They have not acted on the local funding bills. So we sit here today, as we've come before you before, there is uncertainty on exactly what they're going to do. But the Senate plan, and I think it's looking very likely that the Assembly is going to adopt something very similar, if not exactly the same. But it would do it would have a Prop 1A borrowing of the property tax that would hit the city to the tune of about $120 million. The bill would include a JPA that would allow for local agencies to borrow that money secured by the state's repayment. The exact terms of that JPA, however, are still being worked out. The League of California Cities, which put the JPA together for the 2003 VLF borrowing, sent a letter saying that the way that the JPA is structured in the legislation, the interest rate caps and other issues, they believe that it will not be possible to go through the state JPA to borrow as it's currently structured. So clearly, I think an issue for the CAO to address would be that if the state JPA doesn't work and we're not able to borrow, whether the city could borrow on its own. The risk there obviously is the repayment source is the city revenues, and we're banking on the state rather than the other way around. They are taking the gas tax money as well. Last night at something around 2 in the morning, my information is the mayor's office was able to get into the bill a borrowing rather than a straight take. And how that would work is that they would take the money for 2 years, they would start repaying it in year 3 and repay it over a 10-year period. So that would be $66 million to the city in each of the next 2 years. The question there is whether that sort of repayment obligation from the state would let us borrow against the $66 million. And again, I know that's an issue that the CAO will want to address. Other than that, there are there clearly are uncertainties. The CRA issue, which I know Cecilia can address, and the HUDA or the gas tax take has to be validated. So we're not going to know for sure what's going to happen probably until December. So we're still operating under a great deal of uncertainty. But if the bills come out as we think they will, I think clearly we need to assume from a budgetary standpoint that that money is gone.
Pointing to the impact the state's budget will have on city services across the board, District 6 Council member Tony Cardenas wants to know how much money will be taken from Los Angeles.
What is the impact based on the State Senate bill, the Assembly bill, as we see them today, based on our basic analysis? How much are we being hit with these actions? How much less money is the city of Los Angeles going to have to work with because of their actions?
It would be $186 million in the current fiscal year. I don't, at this point, the property tax borrowing is not for 2 years, I don't believe. So we're looking at another $66 million in gas tax next year.
So those actions, do they basically implicate our ability to continue to fund every department in the city? Is every department in the city potentially could be affected by that magnitude of a taking?
Yes. We cannot afford a $180 million hit if we are not able to borrow in some fashion. Every department in the city would take an enormous hit.
Okay. That's one of the things that I encourage the public to watch today's discussion on the council on this item. As we put this item over till today, thank you, Ms. Hahn, for bringing it forward, is that I want the people of Los Angeles to understand that their legislators, this governor, have now seemed to have taken actions that are directly affecting the city of Los Angeles' ability to continue to keep our library hours the way they're used to them as of last year. Our ability to keep the number of officers employed and pay for their benefits as we did last year. Firefighters, park directors, people who clean our streets, people who rebuild our streets. All of these are all of the various departments that we handle in this city. And one of the things that I want the public to understand is the state of California, the departments that they run like CHP or Caltrans, etc., they do not take care of our streets. They do not police our streets. We have our own police department to police our streets. We have our own crews and supposed to have our own funding until they take it to be able to fix our own streets. So the actions that they seem to have taken and look like it's going to be finalized very, very shortly is that we're going to see the city of Los Angeles, like every other city and county in the state, affected very badly on our ability to continue to give the people of Los Angeles and everybody who lives in California the services that local government handles. Not the state departments, not the Department of Motor Vehicles, that's a state department. Not Caltrans, they handle the freeways, those are the roads that they handle, not our street. If you live on Louver Street in Pacoima, you're going to be affected. Your street is going to be affected. If you live on Van Nuys Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley or drive down that street, you're going to feel the difference. I just want people to understand that every single department in the city is not going to be able to remain unaffected by what Sacramento did, by what the legislature and the governor did, and exactly what they're doing today.
The matter will be continued until Tuesday, July 28th, when the state budget should be finalized. You can listen to City Council meetings as well as committee and commission meetings on the telephone by using the City Council phone system. In the downtown area, dial 213-621-CITY. In West LA, dial 310-471-CITY. For the San Pedro area, dial 310-547-CITY. And in the San Fernando Valley, dial 818-904-9450. Just follow the recorded instructions for the meetings you want to hear. Remember, you can watch all Los Angeles City Council meetings live in their entirety on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays beginning at 10 a.m. On Sundays, you can watch the replay of all the week's meetings, also beginning at 10 a.m. Council Week in Review can be seen Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m., and on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. That concludes our program for the week ending July 24th, 2009. On behalf of Jack Popejoy and everyone here at Channel 35, I'm Mike Kaufman. Thank you for watching, and please join us for the next Council Week in Review.
Hey, buddy! You with the stupid hat! Come here. Closer. No parking! Do you know what happens when you park illegally on these narrow hillside streets? You block the street so emergency vehicles can't pass. Each year, homes are destroyed and lives are lost because of drivers like you who park illegally. And you know what else? You can get a citation. And you can be towed.
Help us get to the emergency. The life we save just might be yours. How'd you know?
The ball called.
Hey, look out for the pothole.
G'day, Troy McCubbin from North Hollywood. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
Angeles City Council meeting for today, July 28, 2009. We're here in the John Ferraro Council Chambers, room 340 of City Hall. We meet here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m., and we are broadcast live on Channel 35 throughout the city's cable system, as well as on the internet at our city's homepage at lacity.org. We're rebroadcast in the evenings, and our past council meetings are all available online as well. If you go online to our city's homepage, you can also find out important information about city services, our past council meetings as mentioned, and our agendas for each of these meetings. Our agendas are divided into items that have had public hearings in committee and those for which public hearings have not yet been held. If members of the public would like to be heard on any of those items, please fill out a speaker card in the back. If we've already had a public hearing in committee, it would require a reopening of that by a council member. Otherwise, for items that have not yet had a public hearing, a card from the public will automatically trigger that public hearing here. We also have a part of the agenda that is called general public comment for items that are not on the agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the City of Los Angeles. Same procedure, just fill out a card in the back and hand it to one of the sergeants at arms, and we'll be sure to include your card in the mix. We used to take public comment at the end of the meetings. We now try to take them at the beginning of the meetings after we do our commissioner nominations or just before the commissioner nominations. We also have the capacity to have testimony remotely from Van Nuys and from San Pedro in efforts to make this easier for all Angelenos. You don't have to fight traffic, but can testify from Van Nuys or from San Pedro, and we are able to watch here in the council chambers. I want to thank those council members who are here pursuant to council rules on time. Those are council members Cardenas, Koretz, Parks, Reyes, Wesson, and Zine. We have a vacancy in Council District 2, and we have Mr. Labange excused and Mr. Rosendahl excused today. Other than that, we do expect everybody here. So if Mr. Alarcon, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Huizar, Ms. Perry, Mr. Smith will please join us as soon as possible. We do require 10 members or 2/3 of our body to constitute a quorum and begin business. Again, these following council members are now late. Council members Alarcon, Hahn, Huizar, Perry, and Smith. If you'll please join us as soon as possible. Thank you to the public for your patience while we await those council members, and as soon as we have a quorum, we will begin. Thank you. Thank you again to council members Cardenas, Hahn, Koretz, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Wesson, and Zine. We are awaiting one more council member, and it is 10:10 now. Councilmember Alarcon, Councilmember Huizar, Councilmember Smith. We're waiting one of you to come down. You're now late. If you'll please join us as soon as possible so we can begin. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Hahn, Huizar, Koretz, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 11 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
All right, Mr. Smith moves and Mr. Zine seconds. Without objection, those minutes will be approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
All right, Mr. Parks moves and Ms. Perry seconds. Without objection, those will be approved as well. Next order of business.
Mr. President, this is Tuesday, and there's a flag salute.
If I can please ask everybody to rise for our Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could ask Mr. Reyes if you'll please lead us in the pledge.
Thank you, Council President. Will you please stand, put your right hand over your heart, ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Next order of business.
President, would you like to go through the agenda?
Yes, let's go through the agenda, please.
First items on the agenda, items 1 and 2 are business improvement districts in Council Districts 4 and 2, notice for public hearing. There is a card on item 1.
Let's call that special for the card from the public then.
And on item 2, Council should close the public hearing.
All right, without objection, we'll close the public hearing on item number 2.
And the ballot tabulation will be at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, we will announce the ballot tabulation on the Studio City bid tomorrow at our regular meeting. Next item, please.
Items 3 and 4 are items notice for public hearing.
I can call 3 special. We have no cards on 3 or 4. We'll close the public hearings on those. Item 4 is before us. If anybody wishes to call 4 special. If not, okay, we won't close the public hearing on number 3 then. We do expect some cards. 4, we will close the public hearing. If nobody wishes to call that special, we'll prepare the roll, please, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
4 is approved. Next items, please.
Items 5 through 21 are items for which public hearings have been held. Items 5 and 6 are commission appointments. Do you wish to hold those on the desk?
Yes, please. Let's hold 5 and 6 on the desk.
Item 7 is an ordinance. Would you like to hold that for 12?
Yes, we're still waiting for Mr. Huizar. If Mr. Huizar will please join us, we'll be able to vote on the ordinance.
And Mr. President, in that section, on item 8, there's a request to continue that matter 1 week to August 4th.
Okay, is there any objection to continuing 8 until August 4th? Not, we'll do that. Mr. Parks?
Number 12, special for Mr. Huizar.
Okay, number 12.
And Mr. President, on item 13, there's been a request to continue that to August 14th.
Okay, any objection, colleagues, to continuing item number 13 to the 14th? If not, we will do so. Any other specials? Mr. Kretz?
16.
Sorry, Mr. Parks, 16. There are no other specials. Let's take up the balance, please. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 22 through 35 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. Items 22 and 23 are also commission reappointments. Do you wish to hold those?
Yes, please. Let's hold those on the desk, and let's hold the ordinances on the desk till we have Mr. Weezar and 12 members. Are there any cards on any of these? Do you have any cards?
Oh, yes, Mr. President. There's a card on item 33.
Okay, we'll call that special for card from the public, and we'll open and close the other items. Yes, Mr. Parks?
31 for Mr. Weezar.
There's 31. Other specials? If not, let's take up the balance, please. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
On the supplemental...
Okay, 32 forthwith without objection.
On the supplemental agenda, items 36 through 38 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration. There is a card on item 37.
Okay, we'll call that special for card from the public. And does anybody wish to go into closed session for 36 or to call it special?
37?
36 and 37 from Ms. Hahn, okay. Anybody wishing to call 38 special? If nobody wishes to call 38 special, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. I'll take us to public comment. Our first speaker is Dr. Clyde Williams. After that will be Sky Anderson. And then after that will be Margarita Fernandez. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. Southwest Museum. I hope Mr. Weezar will be coming down. Southwest Museum is one of the few monuments in Northeast LA which gives us pride in our place. We like it. We want it back and operating as a full, independent, and functioning museum. That is not an exhibition center for whatever leftovers the Autry National Center deems fit to provide us. We are concerned regarding the Autry's record. Their lease agreement has never been fulfilled to the terms and conditions for 20 years. They made a remark in their draft EIR that there were more drawings available to the Autry than to the city of Los Angeles. That's because they've never complied with the terms and conditions requiring them to submit all of their as-built drawings, designs for approval. All of the modifications that have been made have never been submitted to the city. Their annual reports have not been submitted to the city. Their annual income tax forms have never been submitted to the city. Thereby, when the Southwest Board of Directors negotiated the merger agreement, they did not have a well-documented file as to what the Autry's resources are. Please make the Autry comply with their lease agreement and their merger agreement for an independent and fully functioning Southwest Museum in Northeast LA. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Sky Anderson is our next speaker. After that will be Ms. Fernandez. Good morning.
Morning. I'm Sky Anderson. I'm a resident of Hollywood. I think we have a mayor that's misunderstood. First place, he knows Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the creative center in the world. It's the media center in the world. He said we would pay for the tribute to famous singer, band player. I'm 76, my memory sometimes go. Anyway, and people criticize him for that, but that tells creative people all over the world, come to Los Angeles. You'll be recognized. If you have any talent, you belong here, and that's how we make our money. We make our money off TV shows, movies, people performing, working in those industries. So when Mr. B supported paying for the Michael Jackson tribute, he was really saying, I support the economy and the spirit of Los Angeles. He should be complimented. I've been sometimes critical of Mr. Garcetti, but at one time there was a big liquor bottle in the middle of Kodak Theater and Walk of Fame. and he got it removed. I don't know if he got it removed because it didn't have a license. I don't know if he got it removed because he didn't like the idea of a liquor bottle being in that center, but he got it removed, and I have to compliment him on that. He can take action. Sir, I've been critical. I've been critical of some of the council members, and the ITA, I called a man in the ITA yesterday expecting to be getting a bunch of bureaucratic crap, and it talked to a guy a long time about public access. And he gave me the name of the guy, Mr. Cardenas, Eduardo Huet, and he talked to me a long time about public access and what the problem was and what was going on. Apparently when Mr. Schwarzenegger and the people wrote that law, they wrote a provision in it that makes it very difficult for the public to use Time Warner and other public access TV studios. The enemy, believe it or not, is Mr. Schwarzenegger, in my opinion. He went in the middle of all this. He went for a business committee of the whole state and told them how great job he's doing. That means he's going to get all that money from the Republican Party and the business people.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Our next speaker is Margarita Hernandez.
Greetings and good morning.
Good morning.
At the heart of every organization is its bylaws. When bylaws are violated, chaos ensues. What makes matters worse is when the ones causing the violations are the ones that have promised to uphold the bylaws, as is the case with the executives of the Greater Echo Park Elysian Neighborhood Council. The present president became president in October of 2006. Violations of the bylaws and Brown Acts were in continuous occurrence that grievances were filed against him in August of 2007 by 7 people. In addition, he has also been, he gave us a letter of apology. This is all that we received, stating that it would not happen again. But we've seen as recent as the 25th of June, the issue has been brought once again. It's happening again. Nothing has been done. On Thursday, May 21st, 2009, the President issued a notice that the Executive Committee would hold a public meeting to commence at 6 p.m. Since there was no quorum, this meeting could not take place. However, at 7:20 p.m. thereabouts, the President held an Executive Committee meeting in violation of the Brown Act, as well as a 24-hour special notice, thus denying the public the right to be present. Violations are not only practiced by the President, by other officers as well. On March 24th, 2009, during a board meeting, the Treasurer uttered a sexist remark at a female board member. The CIO uttered profanity at a fellow board member in violation of the Code of Civility. Both comments were ignored by Mr. President. On April 8th, 2009, at a Budget and Finance meeting, the Treasurer addressed a female stakeholder as the stakeholder behind me, treating women as second-class citizens. This is unacceptable and must not be tolerated. On Thursday, November 5th, 2008, the Board of Governors meeting was presided by the Treasurer in full violation of Article 6, Section D2, because Mr. President asked the Treasurer to hold it. Now, who is the Treasurer? Is it the Treasurer or CIO? It continues. This has got to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fernandez. We appreciate your comments this morning. Walter Bechtel is our next speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to say a couple of other things. At least one or two of the council members have alluded to some people up here having mental difficulties. I just want to say, for the record, I find that whenever I claim I'm an author of several songs that I've not been given any credit for, people tend to say that I have a mental difficulty. But whenever I want to get a meager existence from off of supplemental security or Social Security or any kind of income at all, that's when they say there's nothing wrong with me and I am perfectly fit, and I've even had people not even want to sell me a bus pass. So if you really want to get to the people that are the financial problem in the city of L.A., I think you ought to inspect about people who, and these are the same people. On one hand, they're saying there's something mental wrong with this guy, and out of one corner of their mouth and out of the other corner of their mouth, they're saying there's nothing wrong with him at all. There seems to be something very mentally wrong with that sort of person. As far as the issue of caterpillars in the cave, or from Alice in Wonderland, or Patrick Henry people out in the audience, or The Source, or The Voice, whatever you want to call me, or somebody like me. I and people like me are people. We have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And everything that a writer or a person of our caliber was paid is still due and payable, despite what laws Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger enacted. Those cannot be retrospectively applied. So if somebody doesn't want to talk to me, well, that's not my problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. That will close our general public comment for today. If we can take the commissioner nominations out of order. Next, we'll invite, let's see, first item number 5.
And that is the reappointment of Ms. Roella Louis to the Cultural Heritage Commission.
And that came through Plum? Is that correct?
That was actually...
Or Arts Parks. Arts Parks. I know Mr. Labange would probably say some...
I'm sorry, Mr. President, that was out of Plum.
Oh, it was out of Plum, okay. See if Mr. Reyes would like to open up. But first, why don't you tell us about your ongoing interest and what you learned the first term and what you'd like to do in the second term. Thank you for your service.
Good morning. Roella Louis, Council District 5. I am really pleased to be reappointed to the Commission. As you know, I've been with the city for many years. I've learned a lot on the Cultural Heritage Commission now that it's under the Planning Department, and we are doing great things. Under the leadership of Gail Goldberg and Ken Bernstein, we have some very interesting projects that affect the entire city. As you know, our city is very young, and we are now at the cusp of transition into real historic monument considerations, unlike the East that has been entrenched for many years. And to that end, we are working very vigorously to update our historic preservation ordinance, which will accommodate this transition. And it's very exciting because it will make our city at the head of the cusp for historic preservation. Secondly, we are doing, under the leadership of Ken Bernstein, a very all-encompassing citywide Survey LA, in which we are going to, I'm sure you've heard, document and cite all the historic buildings in our city over a 3-year period with the help of the Getty Conservation funding.
And just as a side note, if the public wants to get involved, how do they get involved? Isn't there a website?
The public is always able to get involved. It's run at a huge volunteers. Mr. Reyes asked me at committee if there are students that can be involved, and yes, there is a model project from Kennedy High School in which they became involved and did an entire survey of a certain area. Very exciting at the community grassroots level. And also, as you remember, there was a very large lawsuit with the Ambassador Hotel project in which there was money set aside for the LAUSD Historic Preservation Initiative. And we have just, and I sit on this committee headed by the Conservancy. The money is at the California Community Foundation. We awarded 4 historic preservation grants, one to Barton Hills Elementary School, one to John Marshall High School, and forgive me, I forgot what Barton Hills was doing, but Marshall is restoring fixtures in the auditorium. I'm sorry, Mr. Labange is here. Mar Vista Elementary School, the auditorium seats, and San Pedro High School, they're going to be restoring a mural. It is, because of my years of grants leadership, I will, we've created a format where we would do site visits, there will be a plaque, and there will be an outcome report. And I'd like to have Ken bring that back to you in council. And finally, with my other hat from the arts, I sat on the National Endowment for the Arts stimulus package for the arts. And I was one of 5 people across the nation who adjudicated in Washington, D.C., the only component that had face-to-face panel review. And I'm happy to report, as it was announced, that the City of Los Angeles Cultural Affairs Department received a $250 grant from this pot of money.
You mean $250,000, right?
$250,000.
Okay. I just want to make sure. You said $250 and I was worried we only got $250.
No. And it was one of the highest awards, and you should be very proud that, well, I can't tell you exactly the outcome. They scored very highly. So that's my report from me, and I'd like to say I'm very pleased to be working under the Council District 5 with our new Councilman Koretz.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your great work, and I'd like to recognize the chair of our Plum Committee, Mr. Reyes, and then Ms. Perry.
Thank you, Council President, and also thank you for taking the commissioners up front, and we know that they're volunteers, and with Ms. Louie as a reappointment, I want to thank you for your constant vigilance and looking out for the city, especially in the arts in these dire economic times, to have your creativity experience, to figure out new approaches in dealing with the demands of our city, the needs of our youth, our seniors, in this realm of cultural, in the Cultural Affairs Department and Commission truly is needed, and I can't thank you enough for all your hard work and for everything you've done over the years with the City of Los Angeles.
Thank you.
As a principal leader, I believe, the Pacific Island community where you have shared a lot with the city, and through your work, I mean, again, we are very lucky to have you. I want to thank the mayor for reappointing you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Perry is our next speaker.
Ruel is one of the most qualified candidates for commissioner that we've ever had, so I can call the question right now.
Well, you already spoke, so you can't call the question too, but you're the last one on the queue, so we will take your good advice and take a vote. And if we can please open the roll on the reappointment, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
You are unanimously approved, and thank you again for your great service. Appreciate it. I'd like to recognize Mr. Reyes for our next appointee. Just before, let's go ahead. We have the ordinances that we have special now that we have 12 members. Let's go ahead on 7 and then 24 through 28. If we can take those together. Please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Those are approved. Item number 6 is next before us. And Helena Giovanni, if you'd like to come forward to the table. I'd like to recognize Mr. Reyes again for this nomination for the Building and Safety Commission.
Thank you again, Council President Helena Giovanni. Thank you for your time. I know you waited quite a bit at the last committee. Council went a little bit over. So I think one of the key traits for this job, as you know, is patience. And so can you just speak a little bit about your experience being that this is a reappointment on the board, and maybe what you'd like to see as you leave this board in the future?
Thank you very much. It is my honor to be serving again or being reappointed for this position. I worked for the last 3 years, and I must say that I've been very proud to work with the Department of Los Angeles Building and Safety. It's a great department, and I'm proud to be part of it and to continue to serve the residents of the City of Los Angeles.
Okay, colleagues, I strongly urge and I vote just commitment to the city, and we need your experience in continuing moving the city forward with your insight. And again, I want to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. There are no other speakers on the queue, so let's go ahead and open the roll on the reappointment as well. Close the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Congratulations as well. You got another term. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Next, we'll take up our commissioners. Number 22 is our next one. And this is for Mr. Herrera. If you'd like to come forward, sir, to the table here. And I know Mr. Labange is not here, but I've reviewed this paperwork and want to thank you for your great career and your service and your qualifications. If there's anything you'd like to say to the council, the microphone's just in front of you there.
Microphone in the back?
A little bit to your left.
My left.
And forward. There you go, right there. Perfect.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councilman and ladies and gentlemen. These past 2 years have been a great learning experience. As a member of a small segment of the population, the disabled population, serving on the Commission on Disabilities has taught me that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. My involvement with such things as the first emergency responding teams and the like to provide services for persons with disabilities has taught me that there's so much stuff that needs to be prepared, needs to be worked on to make things better for the quality of life for everybody within the City of Los Angeles. I really look forward to getting more involved and doing more work to make a difference for everybody. In addition, there are some issues in other areas that I'm focusing on to try and make a difference and improve services, such as paratransit service for the disabled community and the elderly as well. So my commitment still stands. It's not for me, it's for the rest of us who live in this wonderful city.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to recognize Ms. Hahn as our next speaker.
Thank you. And thank you, Louis, for your willingness to serve on this commission again. I am very troubled by a number of things coming down from the state's budget. Particularly, I understand that some of the budget cuts will severely impact those who are disabled in California, particularly, I think, disabled children. What can we do in the city of Los Angeles through your commission to maybe mitigate some of these cuts that I think are coming down from the state, which will drastically impact the quality of life for our disabled residents here in Los Angeles?
Well, at this point, I can tell you that if I was to give you an answer right now, I'd be lying to you because I am not sure how exactly this thing is going to be impacting. But I'm sure that, like everything else, we need to make adjustments and reduce wasteful spending wherever possible. I know there are such things as HSS, home support services that are being cut, which affects everybody, including the children. And with disabled people with children also get impacted. My objective is to learn more about what it is that I can do, how can I voice my opinion to make a difference and help to diminish the impact that all these cuts will have on the quality of life for these people. After all, they are members of this society and they should be treated as important people like everybody else.
Thank you. I think that's what I would just encourage you and the other members of your commission to continue to be this voice, this very loud, unified voice for those who are disabled in our city in Los Angeles, so that we know, as the policymakers and the lawmakers here in Los Angeles, what we need to continue to do to respect this group of citizens. But we will count on you. We will count on you and your commission to continue to be a very loud voice for those people. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Again, if there are no other council members who wish to be heard, I want to thank you, Mr. Herrera, for your great service to the people of Los Angeles. And let's open the roll on the reappointment, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have for our last appointment, we have the nomination for Dr. Sonia Molina. It's always a pleasure to see you. If you'd like to come forward to the table. And I know this also went through our arts, or it was waived out of our Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging Committee. I think many of us can speak to Dr. Molina's incredible career, both on the medical side as well as on the service side. And we thank you for your great service to the people of Los Angeles, your activism in the Salvadoran community, and the great work that you've done for all of our families and young people even before this. I'd like to recognize Mr. Huizar and then Mr. Reyes to say a few words, and then we'll see if you'd like to add anything. Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, and I just want to echo our Council President in recognizing your outstanding work in the community, and you not only are a role model for many Latinas in terms of your professional career, but you're out there being active in the community, and that says a lot for Latinas who want to look up to role models. Now, I also recently enjoyed us going down to El Salvador to be observers of the elections down there, and when we were down there, I recognized the historic event that we were actually witnessing in terms of having fair and transparent elections in El Salvador that will hopefully lead to more equity in that country. So that goes to show that you are not only involved here in the city of Los Angeles improving the lives of children and families, but you're also involved internationally in making sure that we do have democratic processes in El Salvador and other Central American countries. So thank you for your work, and I often wonder how you find the time to do everything you do, but you do a great job at everything you're involved with. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huizar. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just would rise to thank Dr. Molina. Throughout the years, I've seen you in many, many events. working with Salif, Caressa, on, and to have a Salvadorian woman representing the professional field, but also as an individual who has not stopped caring and never forgot where you came from, especially in areas like Pico Union, Westlake, and other parts of the city where your presence is direly needed. I want to say thank you, just publicly show you my gratitude for everything you've done in the neighborhoods that I represented since past 8 years as a deputy for 10 years. And to see your presence there has been amazing. So again, thank you so much. I encourage and I vote, and thank the mayor for having you here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. Dr. Molina, would you like to add anything about the service?
Yes, I wanted to thank you all for your vote of confidence for the last 4 years. I've been working with CCYF, and the commission has done a wonderful job of working with the families, with the children, and having coalitions with the parents, the schools, and the police department. And I appreciate that I'm being asked to serve again. The times are going to be challenging because we're going to be merging 3 commissions, and we've had cuts in terms of the staff. But with the challenge comes work, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molina. If there are no other members who wish to be heard, let's please prepare the roll on the reappointment and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Congratulations and thank you again from all of us. Appreciate your service. That is the last commissioner, is that correct? So if we can take the items in order, please.
Item 1 was called special for cards.
Okay. We have cards on item number 1. I'd like to invite, Stan Goldstein forward? Good morning, sir. And then Steve Gibson will be our next speaker.
Well, I'm disheartened to see Mr. Labange not here to spend our money again. But what I want to say is I would not be opposed to this ordinance if it was done properly, and I feel it's an underfunded program that needs to be expanded to the complete segment of commercial operations, including apartment buildings in the area, which would then allow for complete and professional contract to be delivered to the public. As it is now, by the city not enforcing the zoning laws in the area, it restricts what we can do with the property that is there. Therefore, we really wouldn't get any benefit from this at this time. And it's a hardship on my tenants. I've brought a complete report of what I feel the problems are distributed to each member, and a cover letter and a letter from one of my tenants describing their hardship at this time of economic stress. So I would just like the members to read that over if possible and consider that when making their vote on this item. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson?
Steve Gibson, Executive Director of the North Hollywood Business Improvement District. I'm just here to thank you for your support in the past and hopefully for your support today on renewing the Business Improvement District. We've been in business there now for 3 years and have made a major change to the environment in North Hollywood, and look forward to going forward for the next 5 years with your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Bob, is it Akava?
Yeah, Akivan.
I can't read your writing, I'm sorry.
That's fine. It's who's right.
Say your name for the record.
My name is Bob Akivan. I'm the present president of NoHo BID. Just wanted to thank you for your support in the past, and also appreciate your support for the next 5 years of our term. We have made tremendous amount of changes in NoHo with safety and also cleaning of the streets. We have seen the results. Past 2.5 years has been a major impact in our area, attracting new businesses, attracting new, better tenancies for commercial and for residential, and the overall development has been quite a success. We have meetings on a monthly basis. I will invite Mr. Goldstein, please join us, and we can talk about any issues, and we can talk about improving our ways. And again, thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. There are no additional cards, no speakers in the queue, so Mr. Clerk, if you would please.
Madam President,
Yes.
this is simply closing the public hearing today. The ballot tabulation will be at tomorrow's meeting.
All right, thank you very much. What's our next item?
Item 3, called special by Councilmember Garcetti, and there are cards on that.
Mr. Garcetti.
Very much, Madam President. I know we have some cards on this. I'd love to hear the cards first and welcome my friends from the Hollywood community that have worked so hard on this project.
Great.
Then I'll say some words after.
All right, that's great. The first speaker will be Rebecca Peklar, followed by Carrie Morrison, followed by Kip Rudd.
It's Rebecca Perkins, actually. My handwriting's terrible. I would like to first start by thanking the City Council for identifying the alley as a potential public space and opening up the possibility of renovating the space into the city's first pedestrian mall. I would also like to thank the City Council for dedicating the staff and resources necessary to transform this vision into reality. In particular, Field Deputy Helen Lung from Council President Eric Garcetti's office. I represent the owner of two properties, 1633 and 1637 Cosmo Street, and we'd like to express our support for the dedication of this alley into a pedestrian mall. While we have owned both properties for over a year and a half, our entertainment production business has been operating in Hollywood for the last 13 years. We've seen our neighborhood transformed over the past 10 years, due in large part to the efforts of our fellow property owners and local businesses. We are dedicated to expanding the safety and beautification of the area that continues to thrive and improve. Since the time that we've owned the property, however, we have not had access to the back of our building for sanitation services, general maintenance, or even minor repairs due to the installation of unpermitted and illegal gates erected by business owners across the alley. We have reached out to our neighbors on a number of occasions to try to share the space equitably with little success. We see the establishment of the pedestrian mall as a means to regain access to our property while greatly enhancing the physical environment surrounding our property. We are grateful to the City Council for taking this innovative approach to create a shared alley through this egalitarian process and look forward to working with our neighbors to continue developing and beautifying the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie Morrison. And then after Carrie will be Kip Rudd.
Good morning, members of the City Council. My name is Carrie Morrison. I'm Executive Director of the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance, and we manage the Hollywood Entertainment District bid. I am not speaking in favor or against the mall because, as a rule, our property owners do not take positions on land use issues. But I just want to applaud what I see as a great example of vision, leadership, and a public-private partnership in Hollywood. Every great story has a beginning and a middle and an end. And in this case, the beginning started with one of our bid staff, Sarah McPherson, who, while at UCLA working on a degree in urban planning, had a vision for transforming the alleys in Hollywood into a pedestrian network, similar to what you see in Pasadena. And that vision was translated into a master's thesis and inspired a lot of the property owners and our City Council staff to possibly pursue this in Hollywood. The middle of this is an amazing team of city employees led by the Bureau of Engineering, Carlos de la Fuente in particular, and Stephen Chu and their staff, who really embraced this vision and have been there with us at meetings to try to translate this idea into a reality. We're also very grateful for the partnership with the Community Redevelopment Agency, Kip Rudd, and also one of our property owners who took on the thankless task of leading this effort, Aziz Banayan, who is out of the country right now. But as you know, anytime you take on that leadership role, it is a thankless task. The end of the story, though, the reason I wanted to stand up and be in front of you today was to thank Helen Lung Thank you, Helen. She's here. Helen is leaving us, I think, this week, heading for the Kennedy School at Harvard. And we have just so benefited from her presence in Hollywood and her shepherding of this very complicated consensus-building project into a reality which I suspect is going to come true today. We're going to miss Helen terribly. Eric, I don't know who the heck you're going to find to fill her. Maybe just you. How about you? I don't know that you could actually do it, though, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Kambiz Batmangulik. Oh, Kip. I'm sorry, Kip, and then Kambiz, and then we'll close with Jonathan Hodges.
Good morning. My name is Kip Rudd. I'm the senior planner for the Hollywood Redevelopment Project area. We're very excited about the proposed designation of the East Cahuenga Corridor Alley as a pedestrian mall. The alley is located in the Hollywood Redevelopment Project area. We've been working closely with Helen with the Council District 13 office Bureau of Engineering, the Business Improvement District, community stakeholders and abutting properties and businesses to determine the feasibility of transforming the alley into a pedestrian zone lined with outdoor dining and other uses. We believe that this is a potential prototype for other alley resources in the project area and look forward to continuing work with the community as we proceed to final design and implementation.
Good morning. My name is Kambiz Batmanglij, and I'm one of the property owners on Hollywood Boulevard. And I want to say I've been in Hollywood for 34 years. And when I was counting, I was actually about over 10,000 times I've been coming to Hollywood. So I'm one of those older persons that have been in Hollywood. But one thing I have to say, the last 5 years, the improvement that I have seen in Hollywood is incredible. And I give all this credit to under leadership of Mr. Garcetti. And I want to thank you from bottom of the heart, from all of us, all the community, and also your staff, especially Helen, that she had done an incredible job, and thank you to her, and also CRA, that is actually start to funding, which is wonderful. We thank you again from them. And the last, not the least, Carrie Merson and Sarah, what a wonderful people that bring all the property owners under one ceiling and around one table. And thank you.
Jonathan Hodges is our last speaker.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hodges, and I'm a property owner on 6367 Selma Avenue and also 1605 Cosmo. And I'm just here to thank you for all your hard work. Our family has been in that area since 1962, and the improvement in the last 10 years has been amazing, and just came here to show our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, everybody who came, took time out of your day to be here to testify here. Part of the nature of coming to City Council is often people come when they're not pleased with things, and that's what we're here for. But it's also great for folks out there to see what happens when people do work together, when we have all levels of business and government and community, and a great vision. And Sarah, thank you for the kernel of this idea. As we go to look at Helen, who's going now to Harvard, as was mentioned, for graduate school, this has been a little bit of her pre-thesis, working on it as well, and it will be great to see the work that she does. But Helen, come up here while I'm speaking. Just I want to make sure people at home can see your face. This initiative, colleagues, in Hollywood will result in the first pedestrian alleyway in Hollywood. I was joking with Mr. Parks, who's very passionate about making sure that in his areas, alleyways that have never been paved get paved. I said, we're doing the opposite in Hollywood, so he asked for the asphalt when we're done for his district. But it's an amazing way to increase much-needed open space in a very dense urban area. The pedestrian alley will be environmentally friendly, and it will feature a number of things: permeable interlocking pavers, recycling concrete materials, and a filtration system for water runoff. And for the business owners that have been there for a long time, it has been a place with very little vision. Some business owners have taken it over, others have had to fight crime behind their buildings and all sorts of other blight and neglect. But now we embrace this and use this as a vision for a more pedestrianized and pedestrian-friendly Hollywood. One of the greatest things to see, I went out with the police chief a couple months ago to show him how vibrant Hollywood is at night. We know there's excesses to that vibrancy, so that was part of our tour as well. But at least you see in a city where people don't believe anybody walks, you saw people walking and enjoying the community and enjoying each other and coming together, some arriving by public transportation, others by taxi, and others by car, some bicycling there, others walking as well. And by having a public right-of-way turn into something that is a pedestrian-only alley use, we transform something that used to be home to drug dealers and to homeless individuals and to gang activity, and instead make it something that people will want to come to Hollywood to see, to be a part of. And if we can do this throughout the city and throughout Hollywood, I think we'll really show that with a little bit of money, we can gain a lot. I want to thank the city departments that worked on this as well, and the CRA, who had the vision to stay with us. And Helen, come over here, because, you know, they can all see you, but stand here. Helen is leaving this week, so you're not quite in the shot. There you go. There's Helen. Helen Leung is a native of the 13th Council District, grew up and still lives in Elysian Valley, right next to the Los Angeles River, went to Marshall High School, got a scholarship to go to University of Pennsylvania, and now is leaving us after interning for 3 years and then working for us for the last 4 to go to Harvard to earn 2 degrees. But it has been her incredible work in Hollywood and her incredible work on this project. She's like, we got to get this done before I leave. So this week we made sure that this got passed, assuming everybody votes for it. But I want to thank her for her incredible work, and I know the Hollywood community loves her very much and will miss her a lot. And thank you guys for the vision. Helen Leung. And I ask for your eye support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. There's no further speakers in the queue. So if you would, please, Mr. Clerk, open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Next item.
Item 16, called special by Councilmember Parks.
Mr. Parks.
16. Thank you, Madam President. May I have the city staff come up? Gary, let me just start off by, first of all, thanking Public Works and all the family for putting together a task force and looking at this. I just needed a couple of things explained because it's a little different information than we've gotten from watching Expo Line and MTA. One of the things that they advise us is that using this design build concept not only gave you a quicker timeline, but it also helped us in these change orders and overruns, which we were led to believe often falls on the shoulders of the contractor and not the owner. And I didn't see that mentioned as it related to our review. Is that something that you've identified, or is that something that's real, or?
Good morning. Gary Morris, City Engineer, Bureau of Engineering. In talking to the City of San Diego and UC Irvine and also the county, they had different experiences with design build. And some of it was very positive in that it went very well and that their contractors worked very well and minimized change orders. Other time there were some challenges. And that's exactly why we're going forward and trying design build, because we think there's some real good benefits that could come from it. I think it's one of the tools in our quote toolbox that we want to have available to us, and that's why we're going forward with it on a $25 million project at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant. Also, we've done, in working with our very good partner, Recreation and Parks Department, where we've done a skate park. We have a rotating list that was developed with Rec and Parks, so that it will, hopefully, it does save time in that instance. So we've seen different varying results in our interviews, but we definitely think it's a tool that we want to have in our toolbox.
Yeah. Two things that you identified that we also saw at Expo is the issue of losing control or perception, and the other one was this outreach for our good efforts. And what we found, at least from monitoring one of the major projects, is that the staff felt that once they gave it to the contractor, the job was done, as opposed to monitoring it as they would have it had been a design bid bill. They felt as though it was just a package that they didn't have to monitor. And then we later found that on this good effort, that the prime contractor did not hold the subs to the same level of requirements as the prime was. So the prime had a small contingent of people. He hired all the subs, and then the subs basically didn't feel that they had to be obligated. So it would appear that all those things may be able to get corrected in the RFP, so that the subs know that they have to comply, but the management with our contract compliance administration, they have to monitor it as though it's any other project. And that's where I sense that it kind of got out of control on one of the projects we monitored on Expo Line.
Yes, Councilman Parks, I think we have a great system here in the city with our Bureau of Contract Administration, who makes sure that the contractors who we hire deliver exactly what we want from them. And in our design-build project, the Bureau of Contract Administration and their inspectors will be there enforcing the plans and specifications that we have checked and approved.
Well, the one thing I didn't understand, what is the AB 642 requirements? Is that something that's now mandated as it relates to additional reporting?
I'll ask Ken Redd to answer that one.
Good morning.
It'll come on.
Good morning, Ken Redd, Bureau of Engineering. What that is an assembly bill that was passed, I guess prior to this year, 2009, there were, unless you were a charter city, you were precluded from using design-build as a method of delivering projects. Beginning in January this year, the state passed that bill. Now, cities can use design-build to deliver projects, but with that, there are some reporting requirements that they have to report to the state. And in some of our meetings, we had, and as the task force had gone out and asked, we said, we're a charter city, we can do design-build. Now that the state has this, we were concerned that maybe that would put more restrictions, some of the reporting restrictions, but we don't think that it is. We're working with the city attorney to see if that's the case.
So we're still resolving that?
Yeah, we talked to someone at one of the committee meetings that we went to with other employees or other entities, and we asked that question, and they said, well, it could or it could not, depends on the wording of your charter. So I don't think that there's a problem with that, but that's what that bill was.
And one of the reasons that we got involved with this is that, and it's been a couple of years ago, we had an instance, and Gary, you remember this, that the designer designed something in the zoo that the contractor couldn't construct. And we had that conflict, and we said, well, let's look at something else, and then we found out there was another process. So, and I'm pleased to see that the smaller projects dealing with our parks and things like that, if they are automatically go into this process, at minimum, we save a great deal of time on 2 RFPs. But what I just asked is if you can give us some feedback after or some process through the Tillman project to just let us know how this is working, and then does it open doors for future projects, larger projects, because again, it still requires some attention to it, because from watching Expo Line, it just appeared once we made the decision, we thought the contractor was just going to run with it, but you still have to look at every one of those issues, the cost analysis, and then also the issue of subcontractors particularly, because many of them felt they had no obligation to follow the RFP. So if you could get back with us after Tillman is on its way, I'd really appreciate it.
We will do that, Councilman.
Thank you.
Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, I can't claim that I'm incredibly focused on design-build, but I do have a recollection that at the state level, when we looked at design-build on some of the projects we did, there was a lot of objection from the labor movement. Haven't seen it about this item, but I wonder if you could speak to whether there are any labor problems with design-build and whether we should take that into consideration.
There, as of this time, since we're kind of in the infancy stages at this time, we have not had labor issues to date on the design-build. One thing that take into consideration, this project that we're now packaging both the design and the construction into one package, more than likely this project would have been designed by consultants because of a staff shortage. So in this particular project, we're not shifting away work from city employees on this particular project.
No further questions, Mr. Koretz? All right, Mr. Huizar.
Thank you. So this report today is informational. Correct. For informational purposes. And you made a presentation to the Public Works Committee on the pluses and minuses of doing design-build. Now, again, can you repeat which projects we've done design-build?
We've done what we've done with, we call it quasi-design-build, and with about 35 projects in rec and parks for a lot of their recreation equipment, where we just give the vendor a site plan, they go ahead and finish the design. We've also done a skate park through the design-build process, and now we're doing a $25 million project of underground storage tanks at the Tillman Water Reclamation Plant.
Okay, and how many more do you plan to do design-build?
At this time, we have a couple that we're considering, but we haven't moved forward on just yet. So we want to get through this first major $25 million, get that pre-qualification come in mid-August, and then a few months after that, we'll actually be going out to receive the bids on that design-build.
And so our experience as a city overall has been positive using design-build.
The limited places where we've used it, it has not, we've seen positives, yes.
And what are those positives?
Well, once, there's a lot of pre-work. For instance, in the skate park, you had to go out with a request for proposal. You had to get the proposals in. You now have established a list of 6 consultants/contractors that are available. So when indeed a new skate park is ready, that there's funding available, we would do what we call a bridging document, or about a 10 to 20% design, doing the physical layout, showing the requirements. Then you turn that over, and those we would expect to save time in going forward, because you're not doing the design to 100% complete. You're, like I say, you're doing what we call a bridging document to 10 to 20%. So we do believe there would be some time savings.
So in terms of quality of the project, timing, and budget, it all helps in those areas. I could see the timing.
Quality is something that we're still, since we're in the first one.
I'm sorry, what was that?
On quality.
On quality.
Quality is something that we work very closely with the Bureau of Contract Administration, because one of the things is that our projects have to last for a very long time. So we want to make sure that we're not losing anything in quality. So once again, is on the play equipment, that's very straightforward in that it's the location of the play equipment, the anchoring of it, but that play equipment is, pretty much off-the-shelf type items. The skate park is a little different, and we're in the middle of the project on the first one of that, and now we'll have the underground storage tanks.
Well, thank you very much. I know when I was on the school district, we were waiting for some state legislation to be able to build some schools on design build, and we finally got it, and we think on a pilot basis, if you want to call it that, we did a couple of them, and our facility staff were very happy and would prefer that method. For some reason, it wasn't embraced as fully as we thought it would, given the positive outcomes, but I've been hearing a lot of talk even in the private sector of where they would have to abide by state or public laws and regulations. They're also looking at this as a new method of constructing, and so far it's been, from what I hear, it's been a positive, more efficient way to go about it. I would encourage the city to do it, but also to do it cautiously, because as we go in this direction and find that we're improving on timing, possibly budget, areas such as quality and oversight, we need to make sure that if we have the same architect and constructor, we need additional accountability, oversight, and transparency, and we know what is happening between those two bridges that we're now constructing for them to build their final project. So thank you, and I would encourage us to move forward on this, but cautiously. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rizza. There's no further speakers in the queue. Madam Clerk, would you please open the roll? Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
Next item.
Item 12, called special for Councilmember Huizar.
Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, this is just an update on a matter that has gotten some attention both in the press and amongst all of us who are concerned and attentive to what is occurring at the birthplace of the city of Los Angeles, El Pueblo, Olvera Street. I introduced a motion along with Mr. Labange to have the general manager of El Pueblo come to the audit committee and give a briefing on the audit that came out on El Pueblo about a month ago. The audit brought up a number of issues. One is that the rents at El Pueblo have not increased over the last 10 years, that over 60 of the tenants have month-to-month leases, and that there were numerous underutilized properties that could potentially be used to increase its revenue streams, and that there was a lack of oversight over nonprofit organizations, and that El Pueblo lacks monitoring to ensure that merchants who sign lease or concession agreements or pay rents are authorized tenants. We wanted to bring this item up to the Audits Committee to have the General Manager give an update on what is happening, because after all, there has been a lot happening to improve the situation at El Pueblo. In fact, we discussed how in the Budget and Finance Committee, we directed the General Manager to come back to the Budget and Finance Committee with a plan on how they're going to move forward to bring the rents up to near or at market rate in early September, and to finalize that process at the end of December. Also, we talked about a number of studies that have been conducted to ensure that we have the proper fees applied for the common area maintenance areas, and that those would be implemented along with the leases as well. So the purpose of doing this was to give the public and ourselves a sense that there is some work being done. However, we decided to note and file the motion, bring it to council, note and file it, and the audit still remains in the Audits Committee with Mr. Koretz will take over in a few weeks, and to have that audit be more fully discussed when El Pueblo has enough time to respond to it. So I just wanted to raise it to our attention again that work is being done, and the goal for us now is at the end of this year, the end of December, we will have finalized leases for all the merchants so that we can have an El Pueblo that is self-sufficient and does not continue to draw down upon our general fund when in fact El Pueblo can be self-sufficient and even provide more for the city than it already does. So this item is just a simply known file item, but we wanted to bring it up to everyone's attention as we continue the progress on improving the lease situation at El Pueblo. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. No further speakers in the queue. Madam Clerk, would you open the roll on that for note and file? Close the roll. Tabulate the vote. 12 ayes. Next item.
Item 31, called special for Councilmember Huizar.
Mr. Huizar.
Thank you very much. Is the fire department here to give us a brief update on this item? And the housing department?
Just very comfortable with recommendations. We created a database of all the residential managers in the city. So that's the first step. The second step is we're going to meet with them and try to come up with a training program.
Thank you. As our housing department comes up, I first want to thank our chair of our housing committee, Herb Wesson, for moving these recommendations through his committee. And today's actions will help improve the quality of life of approximately half the renters in the city, or more than 1 in 3 Angelinos. Also, many thanks to our fire department, ITA, for compiling the first ever list of all the residential managers in the city. These key points of contact are the main source of contact for the residents of their buildings, and other city departments will now be able for the first time to contact these residential managers to serve as a resource to help get the word out to renters about bulky item collection, neighborhood councils, etc. So I thought maybe if the housing and the fire department could give a brief overview of what this item is, and secondly, what are the benefits of having this database with all the residential managers of all our buildings in the city of Los Angeles.
Well, this program, this is Domingo Salcedo.
Can you bring the microphone closer to yourself, please?
Domingo Salcedo with the Housing Department. And what this program would do would be a mandatory training for apartment owners that violate the housing code. Currently, we do have a property managers training program that the Housing Department administers to all the apartment owners that have failed to comply with our orders to comply issued by inspectors. And at this point, we maintain a database of property owners, but we are not the primary source of information on properties. That is maintained by the county recorder's office and I believe it's the city clerk's office.
Great, thank you. Anything to add by the fire department?
David Yamahata, Assistant Chief, Chief of Staff for the Fire Department. From the Fire Department's perspective, to have this information available to us from an emergency standpoint is very beneficial. Oftentimes, we respond to incidents at apartments, and there are occasions when you have situations where the location that we're dispatched to, the individual may or may not be home, and rather than doing damage to a resident's apartment complex, by having knowledge of who that manager is, we can go to that location, get the manager, get them to assist us in gaining entry so that we try and minimize any damage to any complex.
Yeah, that's something that Department of
Thank you very much. And so, colleagues, just briefly to summarize that this is a motion that asks for us to have a database of all the resident managers in apartment buildings with 16 or more units. This will help our public safety departments such as the fire department and police department to be able to contact someone at that building should an emergency arise, and also in events of natural disasters or other times in which we need to know who is actually responsible for that building on site and that actually may even live there. We also helps with our code violations, that we know who to contact at that building, and to ensure that when there is a building and safety issue, we have the proper person to contact at that time. I want to thank the fire department, the housing department, and ITA for their work on this. It is not easy to go about this and get this type of information and data, but now that we have it, I'm sure it'll go to some good use when we need to have it. So anything else anybody would like to add?
I think I missed part of this. Jimmy Hill, Deputy Fire Chief. We would like some additional time to look at some of the cost factors that are going to occur with this. The databases in the fire station are significantly different in that there's no interface between one fire station district and the other, and there will be some costs incurred in order to implement such a program.
Okay. That's even above and beyond what ITA has done for the fire department?
Yes, there still will be some additional costs, because once those are put in place, then we're going to have to go out and there's going to have to be an inspection process in order to verify that these things are corrected.
Okay. Sounds good. We thought that was those costs were absorbed by ITA, but we'll continue this item for a week, and so that way we could discuss if there are any additional costs and have ITA explain that additional cost to us. Would that be okay?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. So with that, Madam President, I asked if we could continue this item 1 week to resolve it.
That will be without objection.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, and thank you for all your hard work on this item.
Next item.
Item 33, call special for cards.
Dr. Clyde Williams.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrett Road, El Sereno. Special events also include significant events. Don't we have a process yet of auditing these events? There's a lot of time, ones right now, if you multiplied them by the 150 sessions a year, that's equivalent to the total budgets for 20 neighborhood councils. Why so much money going outside the neighborhood councils when you have an effective means of getting special events, significant events done through the neighborhood councils, which are staffed by all volunteers without pensions, many of them on pensions, so they have the time, they have the inclination, they have the motivation to do well. They are trying to do it with even smaller budgets, so why not use the same procedure? There's also a matter as to the auditing of the reimbursements for previous events. I've never seen any access to how much it cost the city and how much the city was reimbursed for all the special events
which were to be reimbursed by their event sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. There are no more cards on that, no speakers in the queue. Madam Clerk, would you please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote?
12 ayes.
Next item.
Item 36, called special by Councilmember Hahn.
Ms. Hahn. Thank you. Well, it's Tuesday, and I believe we all agreed that we should continue this last Friday until today so that we could get a final analysis of what the state actually passed. Good news is I think they decided not to take our gas tax, but I understand that they could still borrow up to 3 years of our gas tax. So there was just a couple of, I had some questions, but if you would like to just give us maybe, now that we know exactly what the budget is, what it looks like, how will that impact our budget here in the city? Are we going to have to do any layoffs? I understand, I heard that on the radio this morning, that we might be identifying more people to lay off. So maybe you could just give us, now that we know, how does this impact Los Angeles?
Well, you're correct, Ms. Hahn. The state did not ultimately pass the gas tax take. So, at least for the time being, the state will not be taking our gas tax. The City of Industry CRA proposal, which was discussed, the complicated proposal on Friday, that also did not pass. Now, what is in the budget is a borrowing of property tax under Proposition 1A. That's estimated to impact us to the tune of $120 million. There is that hardship exemption that I mentioned that would allow small cities that are on the verge of bankruptcy to get an exemption from this, and their property tax would then be spread amongst the other cities in the state. So there could be some additional liability depending upon whether there are exemptions granted for that. They also did take the $1.7 billion in CRA money. The latest numbers from the CRA this morning are that the impact would be about $71 million, so it's very close to the number that we've been discussing. So going forward, it looks like the only litigation associated with the budget will be related to the property tax, the CRA take.
Right. I understand there's the Prop 1A funds that the state is setting up at JPA. Is that correct? Can we also borrow on our own from that, or how's that exactly work? And what would be a better option for us?
I think I'll have Ray address that.
Well, certainly we're looking at both options.
Can you put the mic?
We're actually looking at both options, and we're going to weigh which one will be best for the city. Obviously, we have, with the AA credit rating, we have the opportunity of lower borrowing costs. And so we may look at that option. We'll also look at, through the JPA, look at the cost of issuance and then the cost of borrowing there. So we haven't actually come up with a formal recommendation just yet, but we're weighing the two of them. Both options will be available to us, and we'll look at which way we can, what's the best value for the city. Now, either way, I think, as Jerry mentioned, the 8% take, which is roughly $120 million. With the borrowing, we would not expect to receive the full $120 million this year. It will be something less than that. We don't know, depending on the actual borrowing rate and cost of issuance. We're not exactly sure how much that will be. We will ultimately be repaid when that repayment happens, but we will have a slight hit in some of our revenues for this year.
And what about layoffs or furloughs? Are we going to have to go back to the table on this, or what do we have as a contingency for this?
Right now, the letter of agreement does have a trigger of $100 million. The $120 million Prop 1A would trigger that, and basically we'd go back to the table and look at our options. Now, the letter of agreement also mentions that we will look at borrowing, and so that's number one that we'll have at the top of our list. But there are some other actions that we are going to be looking at and trying to maximize where we can. Like I mentioned before, trying to shift as much as we can to special funds, There was also provision to look at doing JLB if we have large settlements, things of that sort, that we will go down the list and look at what our options are.
And now for our city attorney, I understand that the only money we can go to court on is the CRA
Correct.
money. And is this better that we join the League of Cities on this one? Or, I mean, this is our CRA money, and some of our projects are really impacted by this. Is it better that we just go after this ourselves? Or what's your advice?
Actually, the CRA, statewide CRA agency, similar to the League of California Cities, filed an action last year regarding the taking last year. They're also already, I think they have prepared the action. They're about to file it for this year's taking. So we would urge, as did the CRA last time that we met on this matter, that they joined that action. It was highly successful, and I think it would be again.
Have we ever, as a city, sued the state for similar takes?
For CRA monies?
Yeah.
Through the CRA, yes, not as the city.
Through our CRA?
It's the CRA as a separate legal entity that has sued.
In the city, not the
Correct.
state one?
Correct.
And did they...
Just last year, we did that, not individually, but successfully through the CRA statewide agency as well.
But through our CRA as well?
Correct.
And they used our city attorneys, right?
No, they use, counsel that we have assigned to their office as well as outside counsel.
Okay, and it was successful?
Correct.
Okay, I mean, I just, this is...
And we fully expect that this action would be too.
Okay. So there might be some other council members that have some questions. Are we also worried that when the Assembly rejected the gas tax piece of this, it looked like that still left a bit of a gap, according to the governor, that he wanted to keep for reserves. Are we nervous about how he might fill that gap?
I think Jerry would be in a better position to answer that.
Well, again, I think as was mentioned on Friday, there's some talk that he may use some line item veto to reduce expenditures a bit more. He can't himself put the gas tax back on the table. I will say, however, though, if the CRA the challenge is successful and he's looking for another $1.7 billion, I would expect again that the gas tax take will be discussed.
So it's going to hurt either way for us.
I think I had heard recently that just as a ballpark number, that the governor may be looking at trying to come up with another $500 to $600 million in savings through his line item power. Now we'll see whether that plays out or not, but that's simply what we're sort of gathering through intel, so to speak. I do have to. One other thing that did come up, that while they haven't taken the gas tax at this point, we do understand that they're going to be withholding our gas tax payments for the first 6 months of the year, okay, which is going to pose a cash flow problem.
How much is that?
That could be anywhere roughly about $30 million. If our gas tax is roughly about 66, then if they hold those 5 months payments, we're looking close to $30 million.
And when they withhold them, why are they withholding them? Are they using them?
Well, as you know, they are in a severe cash flow crunch.
Right, aren't we all?
So
Take a number.
They are looking at taking advantage of monies that would otherwise come to local government to sort of help them bridge their cash flow needs.
Do they then give it back to us with interest?
Mostly they do not, but they are projected to give those payments back sometime after January.
So, starting July 1st, they will withhold them for the rest of the year and then give them back to us in January?
Sometime after January, yes.
Or what?
Or what? I'm sorry. Basically, what for us, the impact to us at $30 million.
No, I'm just kind of saying, what if they decide not to give them? What if, it's kind of like they're enjoying keeping them?
Well, then that goes back to
let's do that another 6 months.
Well, that goes back to what Jerry said, that basically they run into further problems, or if, whatever some of their solution to CRA, then it's...
What's the penalty, or what do we have if they keep them beyond 6 months?
Well,
Do you have any
if they continue to withhold the money, I would say that again, we need to look at litigation, because the money we're talking about is the local share.
Right.
Under the voter-approved initiative.
Right.
So if they're withholding it, in essence, our assertion would be they're withholding it illegally.
Right. At what point does withholding become taking?
That's exactly the question.
Right. And do we know what projects this is going to impact? Transportation projects?
Well, all of this is Mr. Robertson's street work money, essentially. The expectation is that they'll be proceeding with the street work money, and obviously if we get into cash flow issues in mid-year, when we get a better sense of when the money's going to start flowing again, we may have to make adjustments.
And again, locally, we're the ones that will get criticized if we don't do street work. I was thinking, how the state insists on putting up these signs. Have you ever had one of these parks that we've worked really hard to build, and all of a sudden they find out that there is some state money in it, and the governor insists on putting one of his giant signs in your park? That happened to me. It was shocking how big it was. That this park is brought to you. I think we should do the opposite. I think we should have signs on our streets saying, this street is not being repaired because your governor is withholding the gas tax money. I just think it's all about educating people on really where the buck stops on this budget debacle.
Ms. Hahn?
Could I have a second to that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas? Followed by Mr. Parks. Followed by Mr. Parks. Mr. Cardenas first. Mr. Cardenas first, and then Mr. Parks after.
Okay. My question is a warning to the public. This seems to have been a big budget headache and something that has rolled toward us, where we're going to have to experience a lot of cuts at our local government level because the state government has cut money that normally would come to us. Is this something we're done with, and next year we don't have to deal with them doing this to us again? Or is this something we could expect that they're going to do something like this again next year?
Well, with regard to the property tax, if there's any silver lining to this, under Prop 1A, they can only borrow twice within a 10-year period. And they cannot borrow again if they don't pay back the original borrowing. Exactly. So there is some stability, at least.
So they won't do that again to us next year, because it would be crazy for them to borrow from us right now, 6 months later, pay it back, and then borrow 6 months, right? So, so we can expect that the property tax situation, at least for 3 years at least, they're not going to do that again. Because why would they borrow something right now and pay it immediately? They're probably going to pay it back over a certain period of time, correct?
Exactly.
Now, but when it comes to the state of California having budget problems, having budget gaps, needing to make some kind of cuts or changes, massive changes in their budgeting, can we expect that they're going to take it out on local government again next year? I didn't say will they, I said can we expect that they will try to take it out on local government again next year if they continue to have budget problems in Sacramento?
I think we can and should expect that they're going to do just that, yes.
Now, why would you say that? Is it because you don't like the legislature and the governor, or is it because you've seen them do this before, you've seen them do it this year? Why would you say that?
Well, they have done it before, and they've gotten very creative in finding new ways to do it when old avenues have been shut off.
Shut off by the courts, shut off by rulings, shut off by realizing that some of the things that they do sometimes are found illegal?
All of the above, and shut off by the electorate when they approved Prop A. And then they went to the gas tax, and then they went to the CRA money. And I think also the situation at the moment in Sacramento is that any revenue at all seems to be off the table because of the structure of the requirement for budget approval. So they really have no other options other than to cut services and try to cut money flowing to local government.
Unless they figure out a way to enhance their revenue.
Correct.
Right? And what's one of the obstacles that the legislature has and the governor has to enhancing revenues? Is there a threshold that for enhancing revenues higher than cutting revenue? Or shall I say cutting in the budget?
Well, essentially the budget requires a supermajority vote, which means that essentially that the minority party can control in essence, what the budget contains, because they've got to have some Republican votes in order to pass a budget.
So supermajority is that 51%, 55%, what percentage is it?
No, it's two-thirds.
Two-thirds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's two-thirds. So basically, 66 and two-thirds% of the assembly members and 66 and two-thirds% of the senators have to vote affirmatively for the budget in order to pass a budget.
Exactly.
Okay. But I want you to follow my example here and answer me. Isn't it correct that if the legislature wanted to have a bill that actually cut services, is that a two-thirds vote? Say they wanted to take some of their social services budget and say, we're just going to have to cut $30 million out of the social services budget. We're going to do it by a vote of the legislature. Is that a two-thirds vote or a 50% vote?
Actually, I believe that anything involving a budget appropriation is a two-thirds vote. I believe. You may actually, I apologize, you may actually know this better than I serving up there, but I believe that any appropriation...
It's my understanding that they can write a bill such as that in that nature and it'll be a 50% vote. It's my understanding.
Okay.
But unequivocally, if they want to enhance revenues, is it possible that they can do that on a 50% vote, or is it a two-thirds vote is required?
It is not. It requires a two-thirds vote.
Two-thirds vote.
Yes.
So basically, the legislature and the governor find it easier to cut, even by the rules and by the number of people who have to have the will to do it. They have to find more people willing to vote in the state legislature whenever they need to, say they find a way to say, well, we can keep services for seniors, we can keep feeding children in schools or whatever, and we have to get more money to do it, then they're going to need a two-thirds vote to do that, right?
That's right.
Well, the reason why I'm having that dialogue with you, because I think most Californians, and I don't blame them, don't usually know a lot of those things. They don't follow it. They just read in the newspapers that something already happened or the legislature took a vote. So I just wanted to go through a couple examples that I hope that the people are paying attention. But also, I think that what we're seeing, and going back to my question, are we likely to see them do something like this again if they have budget issues that they have to contend with in the legislature and the governor? Yes, I think we're going to see it again, because like the old saying goes, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. But the problem that we have with the legislature, they keep trying different ways to try to do the same thing, whether it's a duck suit or a chicken suit or whatever it is that they put on themselves, and they mask it, and sometimes they actually force us, knowing that we're going to beat them in court. They force us to take them to court, but all they did was buy time, because by the time the courts go around and slap them in the hand and say, you can't take that money, they already took the money, and then we have to wait for them to figure out when they're going to give it back to us. So those are the kinds of games that they're playing with us today, this year. They've done it before, and they're probably going to do it again next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Parks is our next speaker, and then Mr. Reyes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me just ask Jerry or Ray, could you just clarify the one issue so that we're not under any misinterpretation about the $120 million, and if we bond it, do we get $120 million net, or do we have cost involved, or what is the real issue when we're talking about that money?
You're absolutely, your question is on point in the sense that 8% of our property tax revenue is at risk, which translates to roughly $120 million. With the proposed JPA, or any borrowing, there are costs of issuance plus debt service, and we would anticipate that we would get less than the $120 million. Just for an example, when we had the vehicle license fee borrowing several years ago, we were expecting roughly $65 million in revenue in that particular year, but through the borrowing we only received $60 million. Now, the state came back and repaid us $3 million a year later, but for that year, we received a little bit less than what we had budgeted.
So we have the expectation of the cost of the borrowing, the interest?
That's correct. I would anticipate that we'll receive somewhere maybe 112, 114, depending on the actual cost of the issuance and the rate.
And we have no expectation that they'll fill that gap the following year?
When they repay, there is the expectation, but not in this current year that we'll receive that money.
And then also, I think it's need to be clarified that in dealing with these funds, because we're actually going out to bond based on the state's credit rating, because they're going to pay it back. How does that, what situation does that put us in the sense of selling the bonds, or maybe having to have more interest, or just having people have less interest in the bonds?
Well, your point is basically with the state being a triple B right now, and one of the lowest other than, I think, Puerto Rico. Certainly people, the finance community out there has a concern over the ability of California to pay back.
So that could hamper us, either delaying getting the money, having to pay a higher interest rate.
Yes, it will basically translate to a higher borrowing cost for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes is next.
Thank you, Council President. We keep talking about these cutbacks and speaking to how it's going to affect the city, but eventually it's going to translate into how our constituents are going to end up suffering because of lack of XYZ service. At what point do we as a city begin to actually quantify or identify how this affects our ability to deliver the service or the state's ability to deliver whatever service it has left? I mean, when do we start actually painting that picture in real terms? Is that in a month, in 2 weeks, or do we wait for the avalanche of phone calls when, as been heard this morning, the gentleman Mr. Luis Herrera, who is dealing with those issues that pertain to the disabled, when do we start preparing for that? When do we start responding? Is that CLA? I mean, you have all the perspectives here at the table. I mean, can you give us some guidance as to when do we actually start feeling it?
Well, you're starting that now, and the public is beginning to feel that now. In yesterday's budget committee, a variety of departments reported to the committee on the impact of the service cuts for this year, and issues such as reducing code enforcement, and the impact on community planning activities, and the impact on recreation and park services. That discussion is happening right now.
Right, so when that discussion has to reach a point, we have to make some declarations. We have to say that so many hours will be cut. We eventually have to start informing people about that. So that's what I'm trying to get at. I know the discussion is going on, but I'm talking about when do we as council members, as mayor, as different entities representing our constituents, when do we start rolling out the hard reality check? When do we start notifying? Is it in 2 weeks? Is it a month? When do these discussions begin to finish so we can make some statements?
I would say exactly 2 weeks or a month. The fact of the matter is that we're facing a really horrible budget time, and departments are going to very quickly need to define what they're going to be doing and what they're not going to be doing and adjust their staffing accordingly. And those decisions have to be made within the next week, 2 weeks to a month.
Okay. Now, when that happens, and I need to speak to I have several state legislators, assembly members, and senators overseeing my district. We're going to have them with us when we start saying why we can't do certain things. And I think we need to start coordinating that. One idea, Councilman Hahn, maybe we do put up signs, maybe we don't, I don't know, but there has to be a way to notify people that this is a state issue, this is a state service, it's not our jurisdiction, it's also affecting us now because we've been cut for these other reasons. So I'm hoping we have some clarity from the staff department so that we can start letting our staff know, at least in the field, because we're going to start getting these phone calls, and that we should be ready for them, and we should be very clear as to what is and what isn't. I'm looking forward to that type of, not looking forward to it, I'm hoping we can shed some light as to what is and what isn't. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. Ms. Hahn for a second time.
I was just going to ask a question. One of the other things I thought was kind of left out there hanging was the idea that there was a hardship and exemption for certain cities that they could claim, and then their Prop 1A money would not be taken, but then that gap would be then spread out to all the other cities. So ours could even be more than that. Have you heard that?
Yes.
And what are the possibilities? And can we claim a hardship exemption?
No, because we wouldn't classify as a small city. Quite frankly, some of the language was written in such haste that that's one of the areas where I'm pretty sure that they're going to have to do some follow-up legislation to clarify exactly how to define a small city and what a hardship exemption is and what the process would be.
But if it's true, then we could see a greater amount of our money used to spread around.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted that clarification. So you'll just give us how do we want to do this? I mean, just update regularly. It sounds like this whole thing is a moving target. But we want to know, where we're at. So I don't know how we want to do this. If you would just maybe regularly give us an update, have come to the Budget and Finance. I just think this thing moves, and we get questions a lot in our office about how does this impact LA? What does this mean for your employees? What does this mean for your services? So it's kind of hard to keep up with what's going on there. Every week, that would be nice. Maybe a weekly Friday update on what new information we've learned and how that impacts the residents of Los Angeles.
Well, there is, again, a standing agenda item in Budget Committee on the state budget. We could schedule it regularly here, or as things come up that are material that you need to be briefed on as they're coming through committee, then we can arrange to get them placed on the agenda to bring it to the full council.
Okay, that would be good. I know I would appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody would. Thank you.
Thank you. That is our last speaker on the queue. If nobody else wishes to be heard, we will go ahead. Is this an item to vote on, or just a note and file, Mr. Clerk?
The recommendations in the first motion, I don't know if that's now been fulfilled for the CLA and the CLA to report, as well as the city attorney, so that could be noted and filed.
I believe it has been. I will note and file that.
And the second motion, looking at the first recommendation to authorize the city attorney regarding the challenge to the tax money, I believe that was already taken care of.
Okay.
But the second moving clause, I believe they still wanted to adopt.
Okay, let's go ahead and move that piece. We'll note and file the rest. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item.
Item 37, called special by Councilmember Hahn.
Okay, Ms. Hahn, we have item 37 for us.
Thank you. Colleagues,
We have one card on this. Do you want to hear that first, or do you want to speak first? Up to you.
I just want to, why don't I just set the stage?
You got it.
As many of you know, the LFD faces a $52 million budget shortfall, and their union negotiations apparently have been unsuccessful up until this point. And in order to address this budget shortfall, the department has informed us that they will begin to reduce operations as early as next week, which is why I thought it was crucial to bring them here today to explain what this plan is, maybe what the plan seems, what the problem seems to be with the negotiations. And according to what we've heard, this reduction will result in an elimination of as many as 38 engines, trucks, and ambulances, and 125 fewer employees on duty every day. And we're worried that these cuts will result in increased response times to emergency calls throughout our entire city. The mayor has proposed a transfer of $13 million from the reserve fund to LAFD to help mitigate 1/4 of the required resource reductions, but the department will still face a $39 million shortfall. So I felt it was very important to invite the fire department to the table and to explain to us what their modified coverage means in terms of our public safety. And we don't have to say that public safety has been number one with this city council. When we go through our contract negotiations of our employees, sometimes we even get criticized because we have always been about firefighters and police officers in the city, so this troubles many of us. And this is, I think, very hard to sell to our constituents that in these times that your answer to the budget is to reduce services, increase response times, and take out of service these engines, trucks, and ambulances every single day. So you got some explaining to do.
Good morning, Mr. President and council members and Councilwoman Hahn. You're correct. The Los Angeles Fire Department has been given the unfortunate task of, in the 09-10 budget year, of reducing 10% of its cost. In that, we have a total reduction of $56 million, $4 million of which is being handled or put upon our civilian workforce, and a balance of $52 million, which is unfortunately upon our sworn service delivery. As Councilwoman Hahn said, this is not something the fire department wants to do. Absolutely not. And it's nothing that any of us want to do. And we all understand that because as a city, we do feel that public safety is one of the primary goals of government. But with that said, the fire department also understands its responsibility in that the city does face a deficit, a huge one, and that we also have to be responsive to the needs of helping the city fulfill that deficit void. With that said, what the fire department has been charged with is develop a plan. The plan is called the Modified Coverage Plan, and in that plan, there will be citywide rotating closures of fire companies, ambulances, and other types of resources, which I'll cover shortly. The reason why this plan was selected was for several reasons. One is the uncertainty of the amount of the fire department's fiscal budget this year, which, as we all know, changes and could change again. The ability to adapt to any type of emergency that may arise, and especially significant brush fires and other major emergencies that require intense and massive amount of resources, that we have a plan that can be responsive to those unpredicted or events that occur. Also, that it's a plan that can be implemented in relatively short period of time, knowing full well we have meet and confer issues, there's labor issues in this and any plan that we move forward with this probably having the fewest, but nonetheless important labor issues. The other issue is firefighter safety, that as a department we have an obligation to the people that work for us, that we provide them the safest operational capability possible, and then the coverage to the city. And so these are the reasons and the items that were viewed as we developed this resource plan. The plan itself, as Councilwoman Hahn said, we're going to move forward with it on August 6th. We need to move forward with it to realize this level of savings and to not add additional resources to this plan because we have delayed the implementation. The plan will call for the closure on a rotating basis of 15 fire companies throughout the city, 9 BLS, or what would be called emergency medical technician level ambulances, 1 battalion command team, and 3 EMS district offices. As you're familiar with, we weren't funded for those in the budget, and those will be impacted with this program. What that means is there's 28 resources in the plan that we presently have been directed to move forward with, and that is the $39 million plan. What that means on a daily basis is that the fire department's staffing in the fire stations is 1,104 per day. This will reduce that daily staffing by 87 to 1,017 people that are capable of providing service to the citizens. In addition to the resource closures, we will also not conduct 2 of our recruit training classes, but we will keep 1. Reason why we need to keep 1 is that We anticipate approximate attrition during 09-10 of approximately 120 firefighters, and in the following fiscal year, a similar number. To not have a training class for a period of going on 18 months would really put us behind in trying to keep up with attrition, so that's why we had requested one class be maintained in our budget. As far as the $13 million that was brought up earlier, the $13 million is the difference between the plan that we've been directed to move forward with and the $52 million. To provide a plan that would address the $13 million would be catastrophic, in that we would have to do hard closures of at least 8 additional resources in the city, and therefore those resources would be closed every day and on a permanent basis. The impact is significant, and just like Councilwoman Hahn says, we are going to affect public safety. We are going to affect firefighter safety. There's going to be increased response times. There will be increased workload on the resources that are left in the stations that have one of their companies temporarily out of service that day. There will be decreased number of resources for pre-deployment, and those of you that have districts that encompass brush areas, you know how we try to be well ahead of any significant brush season or hazard that is coming by pre-deploying our resources so that we can get on the fires at a very early stage. That will be affected. Also, our move-up coverage, as you know, when we have significant incidents in the city, that we then move up resources from other parts of the city to give a even distribution of service to the balance of the city. Another decrease will be what we'll be able to respond to in mutual aid. We presently have a policy of 5 strike teams that are allowed to leave the city. 5 strike teams are comprised of 5 engines each, which totals 25 engines that we will send out of the city to assist our agencies in the region and, as you know, throughout the state. Fortunately for us, Los Angeles County nor any of the other cities in the area that we are aware of are experiencing any type of resource closures at this time. So at this time, it's going to be more us that are going to be the ones that can't give the level of assistance that we have in the past. We will also have a decreased number of companies for mandatory training, which ranges everywhere from our operational training to our human relations training, leadership training, and other things that are vital for any professional fire department. As we are moving forward and the plan unfolds, we will be obviously monitoring it on a daily basis. We will obviously want to see that any type of incident or trend that is developing, we are on top of it, that we are making the policymakers of the city immediately aware of that, so that everyone can make the best decisions possible considering our limited budget and the resources that we have. As far as principles and how we arrived at this plan, one thing that we wanted to make sure is that we didn't close a fire station. So no fire stations will be closed under this plan. We also, as I stated earlier, have a deep concern for firefighter safety, and that we don't compromise their safety and ability to do their job effectively as we implement a resource reduction plan. We also wanted to minimize, as best we could, the effect on service delivery both in EMS and fire. We wanted to maintain at least one fire resource in every fire station in the city, also maintaining one paramedic resource in every fire station in the city, and maintain all of our paramedic ambulances in service. Although we are reducing the number of our BLS, or basic life support ambulances, which does have a direct effect upon, again, how busy our paramedic rescues become.
Right.
So that is a concern. And overall, the flexibility of the plan, that should a pot of gold be descended upon us, that we can immediately reverse this plan, which would be absolutely welcomed by us with great glee, as I'm sure it would you. So that's the flexibility of the plan, both for reversal of the plan if
Let me just
necessary.
ask you, if the negotiations with the unions, if that was concluded, would that solve this problem?
I'm sorry, would you repeat
If the
that?
negotiations with the unions were concluded and done, would this help close this budget gap?
Anything that would come out of negotiations to help reduce the deficit,
My
yes.
time all that other time.
Yes, that would help either reduce the level of implementation, and again, depending on how much.
You know, well, colleagues, my time is over, although I wish you would have held it while I was...
We did hold it.
Okay. But, colleagues, I don't know about you, but this gives me great concern. And even though you said you certainly don't want to jeopardize public safety, you certainly don't want to jeopardize firefighter safeties, by your own admission, this actually could do that. And the thing about taking resources from some area, from some station, you know, that's what emergencies are. That's what accidents are. You cannot know when they're going to happen or where they're going to happen. It would be nice to know where the next big emergency or the next big disaster was going to happen in the city, and then we could plan appropriately. But that's the nature of firefighters. That's the nature of the paramedics' mission. It's to respond to an unknown emergency or accident. So this troubles me very greatly. I don't like this one bit. It seems like August is absolutely the worst time to be implementing this. There are so many other unique kinds of accidents that happen in the summer, not to mention potential fires. One thing I was going to ask you is, could you hold off on implementing this plan August 1st and wait until we've had the negotiations with the unions? Hopefully there will be something that we can agree upon that would prevent this. I just cannot be in favor of you implementing this August 1st. Is there a way for you to hold off? And we could speed up the negotiations. We can bring everybody to the table. I frankly don't know why it hasn't happened yet. We're going to hear from the union rep colleagues in just a minute and find out what his take is on why these negotiations have broken down.
You know, Councilwoman, our biggest concern, as you recall, we were originally going to initiate this July 1st because of our concern that the longer we wait, the more resources we'd have to close. And that's the same situation here. If something doesn't develop shortly, then our deficit's going to increase.
Right, and we're going to hear again whether or not we think something could be negotiated shortly. If we felt like there was some good news on the horizon, would you consider not implementing this August 4th?
Actually, it was a decision by the city policy makers that told us to move forward with the plan because...
Well, we're the city policymakers, last time I checked.
Well, I mean, at the direction of. And we have been given direction because as Chief Thompson just said, the longer we wait, the greater the cuts have to be.
And again, I think, colleagues, this should be our decision, frankly. We are the policymakers, and we're the ones that have always been out front in terms of what public safety means to us, as well as personnel safety, both within the police department and the fire department. So it seems to me this would be our decision whether or not this moves forward. I know I can't vote to support this kind of a modification plan starting August 1st, at least not in my district. The rest of you guys want to do that, that's okay, but I'm not going to vote for it in my district. Thank you very much.
Mr. Koretz is our next speaker.
Yeah, I would certainly support Councilmember Hahn's approach to this. We heard this item in public safety yesterday, and although you had to be prodded a little bit, my sense of your testimony was there's no question if we implement this will actually cost lives. People will actually die because of the decisions that we're about to make. From my point of view as an elected official for many years, I have one strict policy, which is I don't vote for anything that kills people. So given the choice, if a few fewer trees get trimmed or a few fewer potholes get filled, the people who aren't alive to view the fact that you filled the pothole in front of their house, I think would appreciate that priority. I think I wasn't here to vote for the budget, but a budget that just makes an across-the-board 10% cut without taking things like this into effect, I think this is really budgeting with a meat axe, which I don't think is the way this council should approach this. I think we either need to work with the unions to come up with some sort of an agreement that can resolve this problem, which I've heard could be in the offing, or we need to find the money from somewhere else. And I don't necessarily care where it comes from, because this is the absolute worst place to cut. Certainly we have to take the $13 million from our reserves, because the alternative, I think, is clearly too disastrous. But the rest of this $39 million, I think, is almost equally disastrous. You can't slow down response times without killing people. I don't think that's an option. It's certainly not an option for me. So one way or another, I want to see us turn this around, and I want to see us give clear direction August 1st. They cannot start this process.
We have Mr. Parks, Mr. Alarcon, Mr. Cardenas, and Ms. Hahn. Just as a reminder, folks, I know there's folks talking about voting either for or against this. This is still on the motion, and the committee report is just a report to us right now, so there's no motion, and we'd have to look at what the motion is to either authorize or not something. Mr. Wesson, yes?
Can I ask a question? It was mentioned that we're going to have a discussion with the union. When is that supposed to occur?
We don't have any card in from the union. Somebody can invite them to the podium to ask them questions.
I was going to listen. I was actually going to get the CAO also to come up here and answer some questions, and then I thought it would be appropriate to have Pat McCosker come to the table.
Ms. Hahn's on the queue for a second time, so maybe she's going to be doing that.
So we're going to, I just want to understand, this is going to be done in open session?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we have Mr. Parks as our next speaker. We do have the public comment cards, but do you want to hear those first, Mr. Parks? Okay. Dr. Clyde Williams is our first speaker, and then Arnold Sachs is our second.
Dr. Clyde Williams, 4115 Barrel Road, El Sereno. A central issue in a lot of the fire station deployment is the brush fire. Right now you have brush clearance requirements that are not being fulfilled on a consistent basis, especially in CD 1, 2, 5, even 14. We're concerned that allocation of scarcer fire resources will put structures and people at a greater danger. If you require all property owners who have brush to clear it in accordance with the brush clearance requirements, there would be no brush fire. No brush fire if it was done in accordance with the guidelines that are currently existing and occasionally enforced. The fire department doesn't have the resources for brush that they expend against high-rise structures and asbestos abatement. However, if they did prevention, you would be able to come up with quite a few millions of dollars to supplement other structure fire requirements. Thank you.
Mr. Sachs is our next speaker.
Thank you. Good morning. I believe Deputy Chief Mack mentioned in response to a question by Councilwoman Hahn, or was it Councilman Koretz, that the date of the implementation of this program was moved from July 1st to August 1st. And I do believe that Councilman Koretz said that the Public Safety Committee had a meeting yesterday to discuss this budgetary cut. So my question is, if the implementation of the program was originally scheduled for July 1st, where is the Public Safety Committee meetings from June, May, and April regarding this budget problem that the fire department faced? Where was the necessity and the concern in April, May, and June that the council has on July 28th for an August 1st shutdown? Concern about the policy-making body? Where is the concern in May, June for the shutdown that was supposed to occur in July? why is the Public Safety Committee meeting yesterday for a closing or a shutdown that's going to occur in less than 4 days? The firemen coming to the fireman's rescue, or the firemen coming to the fireman's ball. It's another action by the council waiting for the last possible moment to lead from behind, which is their forte. Thank you.
Go back to Mr. Parks as our next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I have Jerry Miller come up? I think what's important, colleagues, is that Jerry passed out a chart for everybody's perusal that's labeled number 37, which gives you some idea of where we are as a budget for this year. And one of the things that many people talked about, policymakers, many of the decisions that's driving the fire department and every department of the city were approved when we approved the budget. And just to remind everybody that we cut every department 3 times. We took all of their positions that were vacant. We took we took about from 5 to maybe 7% of their salary so that they had salary savings, so they have no flexibility. We even took all the new positions, unfunded them, and put them in the UB, so they couldn't fill new positions. And then we had something called shared responsibility that said every department has to then cut 10%. So this was a part of the budget that we approved. Now, the positions were still in the budget, but there's far less money in the budget. And so I'd like Jerry to go through the chart, just give you an idea. And I think what's important when you look at the chart, and I won't steal Jerry's thunder, but the one thing that you need to be aware of is that gray line on 2910, $4.4 billion. Just be aware if the revenue doesn't come in, that number drops wherever the revenue. This is a projection, not real money. So Jerry, why don't you go through the chart and tell us what this means?
Sure. We put this together, I think, as some of the questions about the confusion between special fund and general fund and discretionary and non-discretionary. What this is intended to do is to show you how much money you actually have available to you to balance the budget. Now, there is a $4.4 billion general fund budget this year, but fully half of that is non-discretionary. Half of that, $4.4 billion, is pensions, it's benefits, it's the Rec and Parks charter appropriation, it's the library charter appropriation, it's liability claims, it's utilities, it's debt service. That's not money that you can use to program for services. So of the $2.2 billion you have available for services, police and fire sworn takes up $1.4 billion of that. That's 65%. So if you're exempting police and fire sworn from budget cuts, in essence you have $780 million to use to try and balance the rest of the budget. Now, clearly there are a whole series of bad decisions that are coming before you. None of these decisions are going to be pleasant to make. If you were to not if the fire department was to not move forward with the redeployment plan, and that $40 million was moved from the shared sacrifice column back into their budget, you would need to go down and move $40 million out of somebody else's budget into the shared sacrifice. And that represents approximately 900 layoffs. That represents approximately 10 furlough days for all civilian employees on top of the 26 furlough days that were already approved. If you move forward with the ERIP, and again, I'm speaking here on things that have been discussed publicly, not in terms of negotiations, but the ERIP, which will come before you next week, would exempt the coalition employees from furloughs and layoffs, which means that of the remaining people, that would require an additional 22 furlough days on top of the 26. That's just the $40 million we're talking about here. That does not address the $130 million that still is unidentified with LAPD. And I think, as Mr. Serrano can indicate to you in terms of the balance of the reserve fund, there really is very, very little left in our contingency reserve. depending upon reversions, depending upon how much money gets transferred from the parking fund into the reserve fund, there is simply not enough money in the reserve fund to cover these cuts. So I hope that's helpful to put this in context. We realize how difficult a decision this is, and it ultimately is your decision. But if you make the decision to reappropriate the money into the fire department, it's going to be extremely difficult to find other sources of funding to cover that.
Okay. Thank you. And Ray, could you come up and just give us the thumbnail on the reserve fund? Give us the steps that when we received the budget from the mayor, what the reserve fund was, what was the final reserve fund when the council approved it, and now with us paying our bills starting July 1st, what shape is the contingency fund at this time?
Sure. The mayor proposed a reserve fund balance roughly, it was just under $190 million. Your council bumped that up to $243. So that is the starting point. However, the $243 includes $46 million, a transfer to the reserve fund from the special parking revenue fund. That transfer is dependent on the $61 million money that's in the budget. That includes the sale of Mangrove and some other things. So that is cash that we do not have at this point. If you subtract out that 46, we're down to 198. We were anticipating, or I should say we do anticipate, we're still waiting for final numbers from the controller, but we believe that we were short in revenue by about $38 million last year, which then reduces that 198 to 160. We had also recommended a transfer from special parking of $38 million to the budget to help us close. Since that didn't occur, that will further reduce the reserve fund number. And so we're down into roughly $125 million range, which is roughly at your emergency reserve. Now, as Jerry mentioned, we do not have final numbers from the controller. As far as reversions from the departments, I'm hoping those will be higher. But at this point, we do not have that $243 million. We're much, much less than that number at this point.
When will we expect the controller to have the best information about the reversions?
I hope we can get some information in the next couple weeks, but it's probably 2 to 3 weeks out.
Okay. The other issue is that yesterday we went through an exercise with the departments. I don't know if you kept a tally, as I think we went through half the departments, as to their deficits. Did you get a sense of the first half, what we're currently sitting with and what they'll have to address in this fiscal year?
Unfortunately, most of those departments that we discussed yesterday did not have surpluses. Most of them had big deficits, certainly in the $1 million range. We don't have a final tally, but it's not.
This is a general figure. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of a $250 million deficit that we talked to the departments about yesterday, and that was only half of the departments, that they have $250 million more personnel and expenses than they have money. And so, again, when we talk about reserve, that's on top of the shortages and deficits that departments are carrying. So if you begin to look at it, you begin to see what situation we're in. Colleagues, I would just like to say that, we went through the budget exercise yesterday. We'll deal with the other half Monday. But I think what's important for us, certainly we have pet projects. I would like to get every alley in the city paved. Other people have other issues dealing with concerns. Every safety issue we can bring up. But in reality, I think we're in a position today and in the near future, maybe through the next year or two, is really begin to realize that it's not a program, it's not a department, it's not an issue or a position that we have the ability to save. We're really trying to save the financial future of the city. And that's the reality of when the CAO and the CLA is telling us realistically we could run out of money before the end of the year, that we have to start processes of people moving forward. We remember talking about 400 layoffs. It's now turned out to be 24 positions because of all the negotiations that are going on, and yet the 24 people haven't even been notified. So we don't even have the benefit of receiving funds in that area. So if we don't get moving, very shortly we're down now to 11 months in the fiscal year to find over $300 million in our budget, and then to address what the state has done to us, and that's not a small feat. And so as August 1st gets here and begins to move forward, we'll have 10 and a half months, and as you know, as we move forward, the farther we go into the fiscal year, the more difficult and the more costly. As we spoke with the chief yesterday twice, is that, as he mentioned to us, it's not easy, but it is easier to gear up early and basically reduce the impact later than it is to start off slow and then come back to him in January and say, increase the take that we need. So the $39 million, I think, is very thoughtful. I think as he's talked about it, there's over half of our fire stations will be untouched. We're talking about 1,100 and some odd fire personnel that are on shift every day. This impacts about 87 less, and those 87 less will be part of about 40 some odd task force operations that will reduce services, not close down, not be unavailable, will reduce the number of personnel on those apparatus. The other issue I think is important is about 200 positions per day are not filled because of vacation sick, injured on duty. Many of the positions that will not be on these apparatus will go fill those positions so that we cut down on overtime. So we're getting a double bang that we're closing down some apparatus in the 43 task force areas, but we're filling the constant staffing positions, so it cuts down your overtime, almost half of the overtime that would be used on a daily basis. So these are things I think are important, and again, the financial health of the city is where we should be directed to, because it's far greater than a position, a person, a function, and at this time even departments as it relates to the city's finances.
Thank you. Mr. Alarcon is our next speaker.
Members, first of all, I think we should all state for the record that all of us have a no-kill policy with regard to how we vote on matters. We do not try to make votes that cause people to die. But the reality is that this decision is a balance of the short term and the long term. In the short term, we may vote to save lives, but in doing so, we may be causing more lives to be lost in the future. I think that's what I'm hearing from the fire department. The nut of this has to do with the lack of finality on the negotiation process at the table with our employees. If we had finality on that, then we would all have a much better crystal ball in terms of making that decision about whether we are making a decision to save lives now, save lives later, or save lives now, not save lives later, or save lives in the long run. That's the decision that we have to make. In terms of the facts that would be helpful to me, it has to do with what are we budgeting now? Are we budgeting on the old contract? Are we anticipating that we will be able to negotiate reductions? So actually, Jerry, I think this is aimed more at you. What is the existing contract providing for, and do we anticipate that we would be able to reduce that amount, or would it grow after the negotiation process? Please hold my time.
Well, I think part of the difficulty here, and if you go into closed session for a more detailed briefing, the sworn contracts have expired. They expired on June 30th, so there are no contracts in place right now. There is no money in the budget for cost of living increases for either sworn, or for anybody, for police or fire. So no COLAs is not a cost savings. So the difficulty in negotiating a contract to achieve these cost savings is to try to find other avenues to generate, in essence, the cost of personnel.
Now, in the coalition's package, I understand there was a brief increase of 5% and then a reduction of 10% down the road. Is that correct?
Well, the coalition agreement, they do have a contract in place, and they have agreed to, in essence, give back their COLAs for a period of 2 years and put the contract out. So they had COLAs that were agreed to, and we did not have.
So they got the COLA on July 1st, is what
they did not. They agreed to give back that COLA. Now, the non-coalition members, EAA and a handful of other units, they did get a 3% cost of living increase on July 1st. They are in the process of being furloughed, which will represent a 10% cut.
Okay, so how do we make progress on the labor negotiation issue? I mean, nobody wants to cut fire any more than necessary, but we simply can't make a decision without the labor negotiation. Are we going to go into closed session on this item?
Yeah, we are.
Can we do it so that we can we go into closed session, because I think that's the nut of this whole problem.
Yes, we can.
I appreciate it.
Si se puede.
Could we have the
I think we have
rep at least speak in open session first? And then-
Yes, what we can do is we can go, as we would in the ERC meeting or something, we can take any testimony from anybody ahead of time from the union, and then we'd go into closed session for our deliberations and update.
Okay.
We have Mr. Cardenas and then Ms. Hahn.
Actually, I think it's relevant that we do go into closed session to speak of certain legal matters, things of that nature, but the points I want to make and the questions I have definitely are not for closed session. I think that they're definitely for the public to understand. And I want to start off by asking a representative from the department to answer this question first. When you look at the budget of the City of Los Angeles, do you look at respective of the entire budget of the City of Los Angeles, or are you charged with looking at the budget relative to your department?
We're charged with looking at that budget which is given to our department, and the 10% that we are faced with today was a reduction in the budget given to us by the city.
Okay, so you look at the world of budgeting within your capacity, your full-time job, when it comes to budgeting within the City of Los Angeles. You look at the perspective of your department's budget, not the budget of the entire city.
That's correct, with the understanding that we are part of the larger city's budget issues and problems.
Yes, but you're not required to contemplate the budgets of other departments.
No, we're not.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. The reason why I asked that question, council members, more than the public, I'm talking to the council members right now. It's really important for us to understand that if we had every single department come before us like we have the fire department today, and they were to tell us about how difficult it's going to be and the consequences that are going to occur should they cut 10%, X millions of dollars, etc. Every single department is going to tell you that it's going to hurt. Every single department's going to tell you that they're not going to be able to render the services that they rendered last year with more money than that we're giving them this year, etc. But the problem that we have, ladies and gentlemen, isn't the issue of whether or not we want to do this. I believe it truly is, and the beauty of this conversation and this item is that we're complaining about how Sacramento didn't get their act together, and they have structural budget problems, and as a result, they're passing it down to us. Well, unfortunately for us, we're local government. We don't have another government to pass it down to. We pass it straight to the constituents. We're the end user in budgeting when it comes to government. But the problem that we have is, are we going to look at the issues for what they are and realize that we have to make tough decisions that we were elected to do? Or are we going to say, oh no, the fire department, we're not going to make them make the cuts because it's about fire life and safety and people are going to die, Mr. Koretz. But then again, when the Parks Department comes over to us and they let us know that if we shut down our parks, more kids just might shoot themselves or get shot at because they don't have a safe place to be. That's life and death too, especially in my district. So the reason why I'm starting here, and I'm going to push my button again because we only get 3 minutes, is that this is a disingenuous conversation that we have with the public and with our departments when we bring in issues like people are going to die, that's my rule as an elected official, and I can't vote for this. Sorry, we don't get that privilege. That is something we don't get. We do get to vote however we want. And then we have to deal with the consequences. But the consequence that is before us today isn't about the department.
the fire department alone. The consequences, ladies and gentlemen, are this. People talk about people are going to die. The city of Los Angeles can die by bankruptcy. And when the city of Los Angeles goes bankrupt, guess what, fire department, police department, recreation and parks? You're going to get cut 30%, 40%, 50%. I'd like people to start addressing that, because that's the real issue that Bernard Parks brings up, and people are sick and tired of it, because he's the most diligent person when it comes to bringing that up. And it's just like, you know what? I swear it's just like my children. I have to tell them all the time, clean your room. Guess what, council members? Our job is to keep clean the city of Los Angeles, and bankruptcy is unacceptable. That is what this is about today. The root of what we're talking about today is bankruptcy. And I'm going to keep saying it and keep saying it and keep saying it, because too many politicians today don't have the guts to talk about that. All we're worried about all too often is our rear end in our next election, and we do not want the firefighters to be on the opposite side of our election. We don't want the LAPPL to be on the opposite side. We don't want the police chief and the fire chief to say something about us, which might be true. He cut my budget. But nobody talks. It's too complicated to talk about the fact that this is about bankruptcy of the city of Los Angeles. Period. That's what this is about.
Ms. Hahn is our next speaker. Oh, sorry, actually, Mr. Huizar just snuck in for the first time, so for a second time he'll come right after. Mr. Huizar, we're looking forward to that response, but we'll have to just wait a couple seconds.
I'm going to want to lessen it a little bit right now, and there's another way of looking at this. The fire department was charged with making certain cuts in their department. They've come forward with a proposal. What we're hearing today is that there's some council members that are not happy with that proposal because it will be less services, possibly putting people's lives in danger. And what I hear really is, what are the other options? And the response we got was that we have to do these cuts. We have to do these cuts. Yes, we do. But maybe another way of looking at this is to possibly go back, and I know we've asked you to do this a number of times throughout the Budget and Finance Committee process, but is there a possibility at looking at other efficiencies, such as overtime, such as our call centers, and looking at getting non-uniform personnel that cost less to do those, retired firefighters are able to do that. I just want to raise that because another direction we would go, as opposed to saying whether we have to do these cuts or we don't have to do these cuts, I think we do have to do them. I mean, like all the other departments that came before the Budget and Finance Committee, we stood our ground and we said, this is a very difficult financial time for the city, we have to do this. But what we're hearing today is some council members are not too excited about the cut to services, but perhaps you could go back and see if there are other efficiencies within the department and come back with a proposal. Would that be possible?
Where we are today, Councilman, is to come up with this level of money, $39 million. There are no other options than field resources, and I hate to say that. We have looked at and are continuing to look at civilianization options for our dispatch center, other options such as our ambulance billing and converting those over to private vendors, but all of those options take time, and those would be at least a year away. If we were to even elect to do any of those options at this time, it wouldn't serve us during this fiscal year. If we were to look at our administration, our training, our support, we could not come up with $39 million, and clearly understand what you're driving at, and we have looked at those options. Is there any way we could save the closure of fire companies and ambulances that directly affect the citizens? But because of the large amount, $39 million, we couldn't cover that with other administrative support or training functions to reach that amount, and some of the civilianization options would take at least a year to put into place.
How much money do you have for overtime?
Our overtime is approximately $112 million, and actually the savings, as Councilman Parks said earlier, that are generated from the modified closure plan actually come from the overtime account, because as we close those companies each day, the firefighters that staff those 87 firefighters then are moved to our vacancies that are occurring that day, i.e. vacation, sick, or holiday, and that saves us in our overtime account from having to fill that vacancy with an overtime firefighter to maintain that company staffing level. So in actuality, everything does go back to savings in our overtime account.
Okay. So the actual amount of money that we would be saving by the modified plan in terms of reducing the number of firefighters out there to serve each and every day, and not including the 2 or 3 recruit training classes that we would reduce, how much amount of money is that? How much are we talking?
Minus the 2 recruit training classes, we would be looking at approximately $35 million.
Okay. And that's $35 million?
Correct.
And you would be getting some of those savings from the overtime account, which is one of the largest accounts that the fire department has.
Actually, all $35 million savings is from that overtime account because it's offsetting the overtime.
Mm-hmm. And my final question is, the civilization, I have trouble saying that word, how much, from the studies we've done, how much can we potentially save?
There's actually a discrepancy. We're not quite sure of whether that would be a savings or a loss for us. So in any event, it would take probably 1 to 2 years before that could even be realized. In addition to that, we're in the middle of moving to our new facility, and wouldn't be wise at this time to move in that direction. And that was a recommendation by the CAO.
And one final question. What if we move the call center to a 40-hour schedule?
I'm sorry, please repeat that.
What if we move the call center to a 40-hour schedule to save money on overtime costs?
That would be the same as a civilianized workforce. Moving our call center to a 40-hour schedule would then require us to, and let's just say we kept sworn firefighters, it would require us to hire an additional shift, because presently our dispatchers work 56 hours per week, which 3 shifts can cover 24/7. If we were to go to a 40-hour shift schedule, we would have to hire an additional shift to cover that 16 hours that is not being covered by the present employees.
Okay, thank you. And so you're there each and every day. Are you telling us this is the best possible solution given the cuts we have to make?
This is the best possible solution for firefighter safety and for the public.
If we ask you to go back and scrub and scrub and scrub again and come back in 2 weeks, you think you would come back with the same proposal?
Yes, we would.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you very much. I just want to go on record saying I'm certainly not for bankrupting the city. So if any of my line of questioning gets anybody to come to that conclusion, that's absolutely wrong. And as a mother who had to tell her kids many times to clean their rooms, there's one thing different than telling your child to clean their room. There's another thing to remind them to wear their seatbelt when they're in the car. I mean, those are 2 very different instructions that we as parents give our children. One certainly is a discipline. The other could actually save their lives. And that's what I think we're talking about here today. And yes, we all voted on this budget, and yes, we asked all our departments to reduce by 10%, but these are, the real consequences of our decisions, and that's the only reason I wanted to talk about this, because we're still the policymakers, and we can still make decisions that we think is in the best interest of the people that we serve. Let me just ask Ray this, and then I want to have Pat McCosker come up here and say from his perspective whether or not closing out the negotiations could actually reduce this $39 million budget gap. Ray, do you feel like if the negotiations with the unions had been closed out, are we talking about a different number here? Or is this $39 million always going to be there no matter what you negotiate with UFLAC?
It certainly depends on the outcome of negotiations. We have not finalized negotiations. We still have some issues to resolve.
Right.
And we can talk about those a little bit later, but at this point, we have not closed out.
But it could be
trying to achieve the full 39...
Right. I guess, colleagues, that's my point here. You know, if this is just a number that, you know, the CAO is throwing out there, that this is the problem until we close out the negotiations, that's my problem with this. Yes, I voted for the budget. Yes, we ask everybody to cut 10%. Yes, we're talking about not being able to find this $39 million anywhere else in the city. I get that. But if this is just a number that both sides are still playing with in terms of negotiations, that's why I wanted to have this discussion in open session and in closed session, so that we can get to that point so we have a real number that we're talking about in terms of this modification plan. Or, as I've asked, let's not implement this August 1st, because if we can hear from the union representing the firefighters that this number will be very different once we close out these negotiations, then that's what I want this discussion to be today. So I think we're kind of all on the same side in this. Nobody's trying to get this $39 million necessary from somewhere else. Nobody's advocating for bankruptcy. What I want is a real number. What are we really talking about if these negotiations get closed out? So I don't know if this is appropriate at this point, colleagues, to hear. If you've asked enough questions of the department and the CAO, if we want to hear from the other side on what they think we could be talking about if the negotiations were closed out. Is that appropriate?
Did you move to?
Yes, I moved.
There is no time left, but we'll take it as like a question. So if Mr. McCosker, if you'd like to come forward to the podium, and after that we'll hear from Mr. Cardenas and or Mr. Parks and or go into closed session. If you don't mind from the podium, Mr. McCosker, if you don't mind just doing it from the podium. Thank you.
2 minutes?
You're still on council members' time, so be conscious of the time, but there's no set amount because you're still on her time. Thanks.
I'll try to be brief. And thank you very much, Council President, Council members, Councilmember Hunt, for introducing this motion. I appreciate it. To be honest with you, I wish that I had had a chance to speak to all of you in executive session first before you started in on this and started in on each other, because you're all friends, and I know that you're all there for public safety, and I appreciate that very much. Because what I have to say to you in executive session will explain that we've done everything and we continue to look for that solution. You all remember, I believe, that I was the first to come to this podium and say we understand that the city is going through a severe financial crisis. We absolutely do not want our employer to go bankrupt. We will do whatever is necessary to prevent that from happening. All that we're asking, and all that we've been asking in our negotiations, is that the sacrifices that are asked of firefighters be on par with the sacrifices asked of other city workers. And I will show you how we can do that. I trust all of you that you got it right when you reached agreement first with the civilian workers. I'm sure that was vetted and looked at and seen to be what was needed to be done to get the city through this. And so what we're asking for now is very, very similar to that. And we've used the same principles that you all used in looking for shared sacrifice. So I want to explain that to each of you, and I want to kind of ask you right now to let's get through this and let's get through it together without turning on one another, because I know you all want your fire trucks and ambulances to be out there for the citizens, and we absolutely want that. Public safety is paramount to us, and I have to tell you as a union leader that firefighter safety is going to be on the line if you make these cuts. Thank you.
Thank you.
At what point is it appropriate to go into executive session to hear a little
Does anybody object to going into closed executive session right now?
Yeah, so moved. Now.
If there's no objection, then Mr. City Attorney, on the reasons why?
Yes, Mr. President. It would be pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, and a reminder, council members, that this closed session is strictly for the purpose of reviewing its position and instructing the CAO in negotiations with UFLAC.
Thank you. If we could please clear the council chambers as we go into executive session on this item. And we'll come back into open session afterwards to end the meeting. Thank you. We're back in open session. No action was taken on that item, and it is still on the desk. We do have a Rule 23. We'd like to turn to Mr. Weezer on the findings for special number 1.
Thank you. I have the findings the explanation, the rule on the 245 motion. If the city attorney could read the Rule 23 rules.
If you just describe the timing of it, I think there's certain ones he's able to make the findings, but...
Okay, this is an item that we are hoping to do a Rule 245 motion to get it back to the East Area Planning Commission. Today is the last day to act. It involves a MND and a track map approval, and we have to act today, so that's why we're asking for...
And you found out about it just now?
We just found out about it just now from the city attorney who was asking us to correct this matter.
Okay, thank you. If nobody else on the findings, let's prepare the roll on the findings and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Okay, that's now before us. On substance, Mr.
On the substance, thank you. Members, the reason why we need to 245 this project is that the denial of this project by the East Area Planning Commission was inconsistent with other actions taken at that meeting. The commission voted to deny the project based on the inadequacy of the M&D, yet they approved the track map. The project is either approved or denied, but we've been advised by the city attorney that it can't be both. Since the posting of today's agenda, the city attorney has reviewed the tapes from the hearing and concluded that the M&D was inadequate according to the East Area Planning Commission and suggested that we assert jurisdiction over the project and refer the matter to Plum. I ask for your support on this item.
Thank you. If no other members wish to be heard on the substance, let's please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. We'll send that forthwith. We will, if we can go to the end of the meeting, we'll carry over the item that we were discussing just before to our next meeting. Next item of business. Order of business.
Council has motions for posting and refer.
Okay, those are posted and referred.
Desk is clear.
All right, colleagues, any announcements? If not, can I ask everybody to rise for adjourning motions? Colleagues, I'm sure the entire city joins with us today in mourning the death of Lily Burke, the 17-year-old girl who was killed here in the city. This was on Saturday, as we all have been familiar in the press with the case. Lily Burke, somebody who was about to begin her senior year at Oakwood School in North Hollywood, somebody who had volunteered downtown Skid Row in needle exchange programs, working with community groups, in so many ways the best and brightest of the city, somebody who gave with her heart, a person who was set to star in her high school's production of a David Mamet play and was going to volunteer helping the homeless this summer. We won't go into the details. I think everybody is familiar, and we thank the LAPD for their quick action, but sometimes it is unexplainable how certain events unfold, and I'm sure other members will want to comment, but I know that today as a city we mourn this senseless and somewhat incomprehensible slaying. She is somebody who had so much to give to this city, and in her short life did give a tremendous amount to her friends, to her peers, to her family, and to Los Angeles. And I know our deepest condolences, our thoughts and prayers go out to her family and her friends and her community today. Ms. Hahn, did you... Or other members on this? Anybody else who want? Okay. Ms. Hahn.
I'd like to join in memory of Enola Henry, who just passed away at the age of 66. She grew up in Lansing, Oklahoma, and later moved to California, where she continued a lifelong commitment to education and social economic justice. She was well known as the teacher and mentor in the LA Unified School District, and Enola was very active in her teachers union, dedicating much of her life years to promoting positive race and human relations. Enola was one of the founders of the Watts Summer Festival, conceived following the 1965 riots. She became active with the Democratic Party shortly after that, and with both the state party and the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. Last summer, the California Democratic Party Executive Board re-elected Enola to the DNC for her third term. Our thoughts and prayers are with Enola's family and friends. She will be greatly missed by all who had the honor of knowing her.
We'll get seconds, Mr. Weezer, and Mr. Parks, and Mr. Weezer, if you'd like to add some words on
Yes,
this.
if I could also second that. And yeah, I knew Enola from my days on the school board, and even in my days on council, she would call me quite often to let me know about the devastating cuts that are being made to education, and whether it was a program that helped our youth or some activity at a school that had been a tradition at a school for years. And there's someone who really cared about our kids and would fight for that successful program, calling everyone she knew to make sure that we continued those programs and the service to our young people. I'm certainly going to miss her. I'm going to miss her calls, and this is a true educator that looked at a child comprehensively and understood the total needs of a child.
Anybody else like to add to this, Mr. Kretz?
I know Henry was a good friend of mine for many decades of involvement with the LA County Democratic Party and with the State Democratic Party. She was also the resolutions chair of the California Democratic Party, had to deal with a lot of contentious issues and contentious people, and always called the people that came before her committee her children. She was very actively involved in United Teachers of Los Angeles. I worked with her there on some education issues as well. Just a wonderful human being, and she'll be missed by everyone that knew her.
Mr. Parks, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to comment that I think the greatest memory I have is that she was the person, or one of the many people, that started the Watts Summer Festival. And out of the ashes of the Watts riot came a festival that really identified where Watts was. Because if you remember, in '65, the way the coverage went is that Watts was the whole city of L.A. And she identified the pride of being in Watts, and that festival brought an annual event in which people supported and found, in which people came from all over. But that was an area in which will be a great part of her legacy.
She's a remarkable woman. We'll put all members on that. Ms. Hahn?
I'd like us to adjourn, sadly, today in the memory of Peter Gardner, who was a city council member in Rancho Palos Verdes. He was only 68 years old, but he died Saturday night after a long battle with cancer. The mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes, Larry Clark, said that Peter was a member in our community and city family that contributed a great deal and was compassionate about his work on behalf of the residents of Rancho Palos Verdes. It's a sad day to see him passing at a young age and still in office. Peter was first elected to public office in 1993 as a member of the Palos Verdes Peninsula School District Board, on which he served one term. And then in the summer of 2001, he was appointed to the RPV City Council to fill the final few months of the term of a departing councilman, and then he was elected to the council in his own right that November. I got to know Peter very well, and this is really one of his legacies, is he was a facilitator that many times groups would contract with to help solve some problem. And when I got the idea to begin moving cargo off-peak hours at the Port of Los Angeles, we began with these room full of about 100 different stakeholders, everyone from port staff to labor to warehouse distribution operators to the trucking industry. It was the most unlikely group of people to ever really try to come to a consensus on how you move cargo. But I really would attribute Peter with the ability, just one of those good facilitators that just kind of kept everybody at the table, made sure everyone was heard, and the different interests were respected, and people felt a lot of dignity from him. And as a result of that, we now have a very successful program called Pier Pass, which last check moves cargo at our ports. About 40% of the cargo is now moved off-peak. It was something that people said could never happen, and I wanted to publicly thank Peter for his work. We will miss him. He was a good public servant.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Parks?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask that we adjourn in memory of Larry Winston, who passed away on July 9th, 2009. He's a transplant from New Orleans, but came to Los Angeles in his youth and attended Belmont High School. He later attended Loyola Marymount University. He's a veteran, having served in the Korean War. He also married, had 2 children. Larry worked in his family business, the Winston Brothers Construction, but later became a building inspector in the city of Santa Monica, where he retired after 42 years. Larry was a avid fan of jazz. In fact, he passed away while at a jazz festival in Canada. He's survived by his wife and two children. His funeral services were held at St. Bernadette's on July 16th. I always have a fond memory. Larry is the person that helped me get back in school because he introduced me to hard labor. And during the summer, he would take me out on lathing and plastering jobs, and all you have to do is do that about a month, and you go find a book and go back to school.
Thank you. Also, Mr. Kretz?
Yes, I'd like to adjourn today in the memory of Samuel Bellman, who died last week at age 83. He was an English literature professor for a number of Cal States, including Cal State Poly Pomona for 40 years, and was a prolific critic, editor, essayist, and poet. He's survived by a number of family members who reside in the Beverlywood area of CD5. Most of you know one of his sons, Joel Bellman, who was an editorial writer at the old Herald Examiner before he went to work for Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky. May he rest in peace.
Thank you. Glad Mr. Weston did that. Also, a predecessor of ours passed this past week, Louis Noel, at 94 years of age, who was a firefighter and then a city council member as well, passed at the age of 94, and we mark his passing as well. Mr. Clerk, if you'll please call the roll. This meeting of the Los Angeles City Council is adjourned. We'll next be in session tomorrow. That is Wednesday, July 29th. Have a great day, and we'll see you then.